Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program tonight, tough night for Sanders. Biden has a big night, but now may face his biggest challenge. A debate. Two-person debate coming up this Sunday, then followed by Arizona, Florida, Illinois, Ohio. Still 577 delegates on the table that day. Little consolation, but exit polls show the majority of voters not voting on issues, and that in 20 states in a row, Medicare for all was favored bigly. Wash your hands, folks. COVID-19 continues despite Donald Trump's wishing it away. Appeals court orders the DOJ to give Congress the unredacted Mueller report. Senator Murphy from Connecticut requests an investigation into the political weaponization of federal agencies against, you got it, the Bidens. Democrats engage in the fight as Trump wants to bail out shale producers. Matt Gaetz quarantines himself in a Walmart parking lot, and Trump buries Jeff Sessions in a Georgian primary. Alabama, whatever. I'm tired. St. Paul teachers go on strike. All this and more on today's program. Yes, Alabama, of course, Alabama. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. I am a little bit tired. Obviously, we were here till about, 11 last night and change. And then I head over to MSNBC to do the graveyard shift when they let anybody who is not wearing a Joe Biden T-shirt on.
Or implicated in the covering up of war crimes over the last several years. It's like, hi, I did PR for Abu Ghraib, and I'm appalled by Donald Trump.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Do they have a special door they make you go in through the back?
No, but I do have a pass, and I need to.
You have to take a service elevator to do A's at 1 o'clock in the morning.
I've got to go through security. That's what they do. They frisk me and make sure I'm not bringing any protest posters in or anything like that.
One of these days.
But we do have a clip. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, that hour with Hayes is probably the best coverage they get, in my estimation. Maybe I'm a little biased, probably, but nevertheless, that tends to be the best of it. So again, tough night last night. The full results are not in. We don't know about Washington State. Last check, I don't know, maybe an hour or two ago, it was 32% to Biden, 32% to Sanders, actually 12% to Warren. They have mail-in ballots, and that was, I think, before she had dropped out of the race. 67% in there. Meanwhile, every other race has been called and resolved. Biden won Mississippi, Missouri, Michigan, 53 to 41. I think that was. And maybe those numbers need to be updated. And Idaho, Bernie Sanders won 14 delegates in North Dakota. Or I should say not 14 full delegates. There were 14 delegates up. I mean, he didn't lose all the delegates there. The delegate split as of this morning in the race is 846 to Biden, 684 to Sanders. That's pretty close. You need over 1,900 delegates to get a majority. However, the playing field, at least in terms of the polls, does not favor Bernie Sanders going forward. However, we do know a couple of things. We know that A, people are voting, not exclusively, but certainly significantly, and we have the most substantial exit polls are from Michigan, but more or less these are consistent with other states, at least on this topic. Would you rather nominate a candidate who, and this is consistent, in fact, this is a little bit lower than we saw in other states, in terms of, but can either beat Donald Trump or agrees with you on major issues? And in Michigan, 58% said beat Donald Trump. 37% of voters said agrees with you on major issues. People did not make up their minds, or there was the people who made up their minds in the last 3 or 4 days ended up going with Biden. I mean, so the determination of who can beat Donald Trump has been, as far as we can tell, and I don't know if there's any like specific polling to this effect, but it would make sense. When you have 7, whatever the major candidates were in the race, and all of them come out and endorse one person, and say, yeah, he is the guy who can beat Donald Trump, your average voter is looking for cues. I mean, maybe they're also just looking for, like, tell me who can beat Trump. You guys are the professionals. Tell me who can beat Trump. And it's very hard, I think, for anybody to counter those endorsements. However, it really gets down to how much can people, how will Joe Biden perform in a debate, a one-on-one debate with Sanders? And that could very well be the first time. I mean, like, people who have stood on that stage with Joe Biden have publicly and privately said, guy's lost a step, and maybe sometimes they've said it more aggressively.
Multiple steps.
Right. Reporters who have covered Joe Biden publicly and privately have said the guy's lost a step. Anybody who listens to this show or watches this show probably knows Joe Biden has lost a step. We're putting aside ideology here because for 60% at least of the voters out there, ideology, policy issues, none of that matters. To the extent that it does, those people favored Bernie, I don't know, 55 to 35. For those of you who agree on major issues, 53% support Sanders, 39% support Biden. For those of you who feel, 58% of you who feel that can beat Donald Trump is the most important thing, 62% support Biden, 30% support Sanders. So the one opportunity, it seems to me, for this to change, this is something I said after Super Tuesday. There was really only one event that could change the dynamic of the race between Super Tuesday and last night, and that was an endorsement from a major candidate who had been in the race, saying, Bernie Sanders, I think he can win. And that would keep the argument alive in some way.
Sorry, self-care. Self-care comes first. And
Right.
they said, why did I stop the anti-apartheid movement? Why did I lie about my tribal background? First of all, I apologized when I was over 50, and now I need some time to just check in with my own space.
Some people could bring themselves to provide that endorsement. And I imagine we will talk about that a little bit more today because, I had some thoughts last night based upon what we heard from Dave Weigel yesterday in terms of what her logic was, Elizabeth Warren's. And the more I thought it through, I think I've sort of figured out like what was fundamentally different. Well, since we're here, we might as well do it. Back in 2016, Elizabeth Warren was able to get concessions supposedly from Hillary Clinton in her would-be administration in terms of personnel. All well and good. I'm sure that was for the positive. Of course, that administration never happened. But leaving that aside for a moment, the fundamental difference between 2016, Elizabeth Warren's leverage in 2016 with the nominee versus Elizabeth Warren's leverage in 2020 with the nominee is in 2016, people forget this, Elizabeth Warren was hugely popular in 2014. She didn't want to run, Bernie Sanders did. I think both in Bernie Sanders' mind and broadly in their mind, at least initially, he was just a substitute for her and he was running an issue campaign. I think from Hillary Clinton's perspective, from the Democratic Party's perspective, from the world at large, when Elizabeth Warren goes to Hillary Clinton and says, you should do X, Y, and Z, her leverage comes from the Venn diagram of her support and Bernie Sanders' support being very similar, almost overlaid at that point. And she could make that argument because she hadn't run. Like the proposition wasn't tested. There was no data to argue against that. And I think maybe even at that point, it was very similar, those two groups of people. And obviously, when you run an election and each of you get a different number, that suggests that these people aren't the same, right? Because you only get one vote. There's crossover without a doubt. But when Elizabeth Warren made the choice to not endorse Bernie Sanders, as was her choice, she indicated that those people, maybe in her mind, it was just like Bernie's a bad person. But she also, but to the greater universe, in terms of the way that those people that that voted for Bernie Sanders felt or supported Bernie Sanders felt, like she's saying she's not with us. That she does not want to marshal our power. And so if she was to go to Joe Biden now, Joe Biden would say, "What? You and what army? Because your army is not his army anymore."
Well, yeah. And let's really spell that out. Your army is not his army anymore. And, one of the things that has been mystifying, and I really, look, it's no secret, I don't like Elizabeth Warren. I don't like any of these people besides Bernie Sanders, okay? But table that. We fixated a lot on Pete Buttigieg for, pretty obvious reasons. People like us are going to really not like him. But I don't know what he said in that call with Obama, but that guy absolutely ran a campaign where he ended with way more leverage than he began with. He ran an incredible campaign. It was, it's ludicrous on his face, and and if I was him, I would be hugely pissed. Like, I have to get out of the way for this guy that can barely function in a debate stage, and I'm a 37-year-old mayor who's running second. The reinforcing pattern of Elizabeth Warren and just totally in contrast to the endless griping and complaining from them is she's a fifth place finisher. Like, not only does she not have Bernie's army, she did not perform. Like, she's a distant finisher on her own. So yeah, she goes to Biden. He'll say, "You mean like the people who will almost certainly vote for me anyways?" And
right.
And not that many people to begin with. And what else?
Right. The weird thing is that you see people putting out polls showing that if Warren had, if it wouldn't have, her endorsement wouldn't have made a difference. Now, it's quite possible in terms of where her voters would have gone in the abstract, it would have made no difference. But I'm quite convinced that there are voters that were not with Warren, and just the fact that she would endorse Warren would give an indication. I mean, look.
Wasn't that the whole thing that we saw when that happened over the weekend? There were plenty of people saying when we were looking at the silver lining, we're like, actually, a fair amount of these people's second choice is Bernie. But that wasn't the point. The point was the media surge and just the overwhelming fist of this is the safe choice guy, the signal you're talking about.
Right, of course. And the thing is that had she done that, she could have laid claim to those people. She could have, like, the best opportunity for Elizabeth Warren. I don't know what she wants, but in terms of leverage, particularly in terms of like, I don't know, VP or any type of position in the administration, would have been to endorse Sanders and then gone to Biden and said, like, I can deliver these people. Where's the proof? Well, the proof is, like, look, I endorsed. And frankly, had she endorsed, maybe it wouldn't have convinced Michael, maybe not Jamie, I don't know, but certainly a huge percentage of those people. There's a significant percentage of Bernie's support that is just fairly normie. They just like they like the idea of debt-free college. They like the idea of Medicare for all.
Oh, 100%.
And a lot of those people would have been like, yeah, because I heard from a ton of those people who don't consider themselves socialists, they're supporters of Bernie, and they're just like, I don't understand what Warren's doing.
I agree with everything you just said. I just think the flip side of that, and that also needs to be brought into the mix, is that she was not a popular candidate in general. And I think so. Like I was actually somebody. Yes, I totally don't like her. I didn't think she should have run. Every critique, of course, I have and stand by. If they came up with a deal last week where she was, vice president or whatever, and that satiated her ego, sure, great, let's throw the Hail Mary. But it wouldn't have helped in a general election. I think that we, among other things, including failures in the Sanders campaign, people need to be much more realistic.
It would have helped in a primary.
Definitely. That's why I said I wouldn't have objected to it. It would have been the Hail Mary. It would have been maybe the only thing that could have saved them. But it wouldn't have been more broadly helpful because outside of a very narrow subset, we're not talking about a popular politician. And I think that's part of what's challenging is that Bernie does have some real popularity, and there was a lot of obstacle courses put in front of it. Some of his own making and his campaign's making, and also the fact that cable was a super PAC running against him. And Warren is not popular outside of certain pretty narrow precincts.
But as much as, the thing is, as much as it ultimately came down to the endorsements, right? Because look, cable was running just as hard against him up to that. In fact, the point where it turned was almost when cable was like starting to turn themselves. And so, there's no doubt there's a lot of people who did not want Bernie to be the nominee. But at the end of the day, there was people out there who just are like, who's going to beat Trump? I don't know. Somebody tell me. And some voices of authority showed up and they listened to him. That it's really, for the third of the electorate that made the difference, that's what it was. Everybody else was basically in their corners. And then it was just like these free agents floating around. Who's going to tell me how to vote? And that's what happened. But with that said, that means that the relationship of those voters to Joe Biden, if it's contingent upon the endorsements, it could also be shook by like, wait a second, I just watched this guy for 2 hours, and by minute 65, the dude was like talking gibberish and didn't seem to have any plans. And, I know that all these people have told me this is the guy who's going to beat Trump, but I've watched Trump for 3.5 years, and I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking, no. Now, is that going to happen? I don't know. Is it possible? I don't know if it's likely, but it's possible. And I think, frankly, to be fair, I didn't hear the sort of the Republican panels before I got to MSNBC because, like I say, they vacate before I get into the building. But, and they could have been all saying, he's got to drop out and this and that. But I didn't get that sense. When we left here, we were talking last night, like we thought the onslaught was going to be enormous. And I'm not seeing that.
I'm seeing a very funny, move, which frankly should be exploited, which is why I'm not going to even spend more time on like who people should vote for in a general if Biden's the nominee. I'm all of a sudden seeing some indications of anxiety about turnout for Biden from these same people, and that's a fear that should be exploited in a Machiavellian way. I also just think I want to go with the paradox that I wish Bernie had run a more normie campaign. I think we have some agreements about that, maybe some disagreements, but I also think that it should really reinforce to people that even yes, in the real world, in the grand scheme of history, a very moderate and obvious agenda of basic dignity is a class threat. And there is a reason why all of these folks amass together. Because, not just, forget even Warren. I think Warren is about ego and careerism, but even something like Beto O'Rourke could go from like a silly skateboarding novelty act to like one of the most popular politicians in America with a certain segment of people. But at the end of the day, and he didn't have any immediate, like the guy is rich. I'm sure he has future plans to run for office, but frankly, that endorsement could potentially go either way. But, these folks really came together because a lot of people really perceived that any sort of even the most modest structural critique of power in our country is a big problem.
Mm-hmm. I see reasons to be hopeful and reasons to be bummed in terms of the disparity between the exit polls on people's policy preferences and who they voted for. Because what that tells us is people want these things, but they don't believe that they're possible through our electoral system, at least not right now, and possibly not ever. Are they just going to give up and say, guess I'll die because I can't afford insulin? No, probably not. I think we're going to see a lot more struggle both within and outside the electoral realm to get the things that we need. Also, I really hope that Bernie is getting his straight razor nice and rusty in preparation for the debate. Leaving it in a rain barrel.
Should bring Alzheimer's tests with him.
I gotta do some ads, but let me just say this before we go to that is that there's two tracks here, right? One is how do you salvage or how do you make the most out of the potential possibility that exists electorally? In other words, like Joe Biden shows up and, starts talking gobbledygook. How do you navigate that in a way that does not inhibit the other track of maximizing your leverage to the extent that there could be any with the party, with the knowledge that they need the left to come along. So there is a balancing act because you don't want one to inhibit the other. Or to the extent that you do, you should be aware of it. But we'll talk about that in a moment because, time, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, is a limited commodity, particularly if you're like myself, who's constantly running around. You got a whole list of things to do. What am I going to do? This and that. Be careful about that because water is apparently a commodity around here too. Yeah, you forget. They turned our water off here. But how would you deal with that? Well, if you didn't have much time, maybe you'd check out that book, 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. But if you don't have time for it, how could you do it? Well, an incredible app called Blinkist. It's going to be a new secret weapon for learning new things and getting ahead. Blinkist takes the best key takeaways, basically the bullet points from thousands of nonfiction books, condenses them down to 15 minutes that you can either listen to or you can read, and you can do it on your phone, on your pad, tablet, whatever, your computer, web browser. Blinkist is made for busy people who want to get to the main points of a book quickly. They make it easy to finish your book during, your walk to the bus, your lunch break. Just like instead of taking a cigarette break, 15 minutes, 22 minutes.
Knowledge break.
They range from like 13 things mentally strong people don't do is 22 minutes. But you can get through probably 7 of those in 11 minutes.
The amount of times you're washing your hands now.
Exactly.
Chance to listen to Blinkist.
Exactly. You could listen to one of these like in just like more or less one hand washing. I love it because I've said this before. There's a lot of books out there that I'm like, well, I have 2 categories of stuff that I read on Blinkist. One is like, frankly, that I would be like, I don't want anybody seeing me walking around with this book. You know, like how to win friends or stuff like that, or how to get more emotionally mature. I don't want people to see me doing that.
Books are for nerds.
But I can, but there's other books I would like them to see me, but I don't want the how-to stuff. So, and frankly, I don't want to hear a lot of the jibber jabber. Give me the key points and I can get it in 13 minutes. But then there's other books where like, you know, a history book that comes out, or a culture book or a society, you know, about a book about, I don't know, like they have, like history books. What do you call it? Well, nonfiction, but they're all nonfiction. But like, I don't know, Sapiens, right? It's a big book. People talk about it. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing. I can get it in 19 minutes or I can listen to it in 19 minutes. So those are the 2 sets of stuff that I get covered on Blinkist. And with Blinkist, you'll get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books, all for one low price. For a limited time, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Try it for free for 7 days and save 25% off your new subscription. That's Blinkist.com/Majority Report to start your free 7-day trial. Saves 25% off. Sign up now at Blinkist.com, Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Check out, I mean, like, Upheaval is one of those I've gotten the thing that, Jared Diamond book, I would read that. But I don't know if I want to spend the whole time. I'm going to read my 15 minutes and that's it. Boom, I've got it covered.
Just your dose of seeing all of the variables in play.
Right.
Okay, check. All right.
Speaking of which, one of the ways I've gotten Saul now to brush his teeth is I got him a kid Quip. Because he sees Dad's got a Quip, and now he's cool like Dad, or not cool like Dad. Whatever. I've got him hoodwinked for a bit, but he's only 7. The makers of Quip electric toothbrush want you to know that the one single discovery that matters the most for your dental care, it's if you have good habits, you're good. And this is what I'm trying to do with my kid. You got to brush for 2 minutes. You got to do it twice a day. You got to floss regularly, no matter what brand you use. And Quip makes that simple, starting with an electric toothbrush, refillable floss, and anti-cavity toothpaste. Quip's electric toothbrush has sensitive sonic vibrations. They have a built-in timer, 30 seconds for each quadrant of your mouth. They give you little pulses to tell you time to move on. And the Quip floss dispenser comes with a pre-marked string to help you use just enough. The best part, Quip delivers the fresh brush head, floss, and toothpaste refills to your door every 3 months. You never have to worry about this. It's a reminder to change your brush head. The brush itself is about the size of a regular brush. It is beautifully styled, frankly, and you use it. You use it when you travel. You use it at home. It's not like those other, it's not one of those things where you got to charge it up and you got to put it on your thing. You worry you get electrocuted. It's super easy, and that's the whole point of it. It keeps you using it, and that's the most important thing when it comes to your teeth. Do the work. And if you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you'll get your first refill free. That's the first refill free at getquip.com/majority. That's spelled GETQUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. Lastly, Majority Report is made impossible in part by Skillshare. And the first 500 people who go to skl.sh/Majority Report 6 are going to get a free premium membership to Skillshare for 2 entire months. That's nuts, because you could go through the whole library in 2 months. It's an online learning community that offers thousands of classes on almost any topic you imagine, and all the classes are taught by experts in their field. They have classes on drawing, on painting, on photography. I've done now 2 different iPhone photography classes, and my pictures are better. video editing, web design, running a small business. I've been working my way through. I'm gonna take it again, but spreadsheets. Because I'm trying to do data stuff. I don't know that stuff. Almost all the classes are less than an hour long, and every class is cut up into chapters. So you can do like 3 chapters, and then I got to go do my laundry. I come back, I do 3 more, whatever it is. It's really convenient. Everyone can benefit from setting aside a little more time to get creative. Skillshare has classes for every skill level. So if you're just starting out on something, you can try something new. If you've been doing something for a long time, you can hone your expertise. Membership to Skillshare is less than $10 a month, and it gives you access to their entire library of classes. If you are one of the first 500 people to go to skl.sh/Majority Report 6 right now, you will get a free membership for 2 whole months. There's a link underneath this on YouTube. There's a link underneath this. If you're listening to the podcast, check it out. skl.sh Majority Report 6. The number 6. All right. So here are the numbers. I mean, this is where we're at this point. Michael, what is your perspective as to what Bernie should do going forward? I mean, assuming that there is, I don't know what the percentage is. 10% chance, 15% chance, 20% chance, I don't know, 40% chance that he could pull it out. What should he do? What should his disposition do? What should he do in the debate?
Well, I mean, he's holding a press conference at 1, so maybe this advice will become irrelevant. But look.
Do you think he's going to drop out at 1? I don't think he will.
I don't think he will either.
Do you think he's going to say, I'm definitively going to the convention?
I don't think he's going to say that either. I think he's going to demand a debate. And I think he's going to say that there's some very important states that need to vote and we need to play this out. And I think, you know, I think he can't keep playing halfway. I think that he does need to say tastefully as is possible. But, you know, look, if you're concerned about winning, if you're concerned about how to actually do this in a general, I don't think the guy I'm running against is exactly up for doing this. I think he does need to convey that. And I think more generally, I don't know how they do this, but I think that they have to have some type of actual demand. And it's very hard because, look, Bernie's going to, if it's Biden, he's going to endorse the Democratic nominee. Bernie is not somebody who wants to risk a second Trump term. And you know, people should not castigate him for that. But I think, frankly, this is the contradiction I can't reconcile myself. Even as I wish he'd much more talked about the FDR stuff and said, look, if you want normalcy, you need reform, and really tried to kind of synthesize the anxieties that people have with his deeper message. I also think there does need to be a certain, like, he should have been saying every day for the past couple of weeks what he said a couple months ago. Trump will eat this guy's lunch. And if I drop out and if I encourage millions of people, and maybe we didn't hit all of our targets, but we got a hell of a lot of votes and we're the only one resembling a kind of turnout operation. If you want them, it's not about platform. It's not about this and that. I want VP. I want a policy commitment. Not for me personally, but I want, you know, I'm not saying it will work, but I think that needs to be more of the mentality, because this game of you go for it, then it's totally blocked out, and then we're just back to like, okay, it's Biden and Kamala. You know?
Here's the problem, right?
There's tons of problems.
No, but I'm just saying in terms of like
Yeah.
this whole leverage thing, in terms of like I want VP or I want whatever it is.
Yeah.
How do you, as Bernie, actually deliver on that threat?
Well, he would have run right. He
I mean, like
to say. I mean, this is what I'm.
But
saying.
I'm saying, like, if you go to Biden and say, like, look, I'll end this tomorrow, but I want X, Y, or Z, and you Biden says, sure.
Well, he's going to need
right,
Bernie's help.
That's true. I mean,
well, he's going to need.
I think if Bernie's look,
but how does Bernie not help?
I think if they, well, look, this is where I'll be provocative. I think if they spent, I read I forget where I read this, but that in 1996, this is unbelievable to me, that the Bill Clinton campaign was afraid of Ralph Nader in 1996 because they thought it could be a point or two in California. That's a time where the left is totally not on the map. It's a campaign that will get max 2% of the national vote, and they're still scared. I'm not saying this will happen, but if I was mapping strategy, I might say, Joe, I think you have basically promised to you've literally said you will veto single payer. You are campaigning against.
He didn't say that. He just said he wouldn't sign it.
Oh, right.
I'm joking.
Excuse me. Exactly. I'm sorry. Apologies to Josh Marshall. So, what I have said the last several months might not be operative. And I might need to look at a third-party campaign. I might not be able to and I have to tell you, as much hate as he would get if he did that, the dynamic would certainly change. Because when you go from we're going to box you out in the Democratic primary, that's obviously achievable, to I will use my platform. But does Bernie Sanders
want to go down in personally, as the guy who made it possible for Donald Trump to win?
Well, it'd be a flex.
I don't think
he doesn't want to actually have to do it.
No, I understand, but I'm saying that if I'm Joe Biden, I'm going to look at Bernie Sanders and go, you're coming at me and you're going to in any way. I mean, look, you can even say to me, Joe, I'm going to be so subtle that nobody will know except for you that I'm enabling Donald Trump to beat you. And I would look at, and if I'm Joe Biden, and I'm actually conscious of the conversation,
I would say you're giving Joe Biden a lot of cognitive capacity.
I just assume for a moment, play along. I would just be like, Bernie, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you've spent your whole life where your final, biggest political act will be to make Donald Trump win. Sorry, bud. I know you're going to go out and kick ass for me because
and this is the major,
you care about the people you like.
And this
sorry,
is
dude.
And this is the major problem on the left. If you ask me honestly, look, I would say if it's just dispersed, I'll be really clear. I am not going to spend time like I did in 2016 policing and cajoling people. I'll always say if I was in a swing state, I'd vote against Donald Trump, but I'm not doing the work of the Democratic Party in this election. I'll be very clear about that.
That's reasonable.
But beyond that, I think that, if outside of silly gesturing, and I know Sanders' answer to this, but I think the paradox is you don't want to be the person that helps Trump get a second term. You also don't want to be the person that basically forecloses on any type of possibility of real actual reform. And I think especially when you add climate to it, we are getting to a point where, the conversations about who staffs the NLRB or whatever, they're important. We shouldn't be children about them. But we're getting to a point where the viability of even playing these games on the margin is starting to become its own form of irrationality.
I agree,
so if I'm Sanders, I would honestly be sitting and looking at, is there an actual play here that at the very, maybe it just even forces them to call my bluff. And you know what? Fine, so be it. But let's make them sweat. Let's make them scared. Let's make them really work here. And frankly, to me, that's kind of the choice, because this is something that's annoyed me from the beginning of the campaign, beginning with all the unity talk between Sanders and Warren. I think if you go into this election with your baseline being that the only thing that really matters is beating Trump, you shouldn't criticize any of these people. You should be nice to Biden, you should be nice to Bernie, you should be nice to Tulsi, right? But if there's an idea that this is still actually a conflict, particularly one with serious life and death stakes, and I think there is, clearly, you might need to push the throttle a bit and as I say, at least force them to call your bluff.
Yeah, totally. I don't believe that a Biden presidency would be substantially better than a second Trump term in the long term. Certainly, there would be some short-term benefits to having Biden over Trump. But if you look at his climate plan, he got an F from the Sunrise Movement.
Right. But statistically speaking, the odds are better that Biden's going to actually get to a B or an A, as opposed to Donald Trump, who is not even graded because he's off this.
Why do you think he's going to get to a B or an A?
Well, I'm just saying that the odds of him getting there are far greater than Trump.
There's no doubt about that.
But if we also say something like, look, you got to go for Medicare for all because you're talking about 40,000 people a year who die without health insurance.
Yes.
Joe Biden gets in, let's say he saves 10,000 lives.
I'm not saying that it wouldn't be better on some level.
Well, I mean, it's 10,000 lives. Like, I mean, if Joe Biden gets in, right, and stops, let's say, the court case that is going to roll back the ACA, which could roll back all the Medicaid, which could leave, well, maybe 10,000. It could leave another, I don't know, I don't know how many people have to lose health insurance until you actually see the deaths. I don't know what that algorithm is. But let's say 10,000. Does 10,000 warrant it?
Sure. But then you have to look at what happens at the end of his term when the forces that brought us Trump have only been intensified by these failed neoliberal policies.
Agree.
And people's hatred of the center intensified.
But we don't know.
We're going to get like a proper fascist.
Here's what I'm saying.
But at the end of Biden, like, we don't know 4 years out, right?
We don't know anything in terms of like, although I will say, I think 4 years of Biden could totally lead to 8 years of Josh Hawley. I don't think that's like a fantasy scenario, but we don't know.
I don't know that we could get 4 years out of Biden.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it could
3
be like
months of Joe Biden.
Kamala Harris comes in and she just goes like,
3 years.
surprise, I've been reading a lot more of my dad's writing than you thought. And I've had to,
that's the most optimistic scenario I've heard
saying. Like,
ever.
No, that's not going to happen.
The only centrist that I have a certain personal liking for secretly embraces her father's legacy. I'll live off of that fantasy for a day or two. But I think that I guess my point, and it's really genuinely like, I think that there's some really important work that people can do inside shows like this that are actually important for the left. But my thing is, I just don't. There's one question of Bernie making a big play like that, which I think he should do, because I think things are getting extremely grave one way or another. Okay. And I think we cannot, where I would push back on you is not like, I think the merits of harm reduction voting are never going to go anywhere. Right. I also think that the idea that it's time to, if you have actual power, I don't think you should be writing a check you can't cash. But if Bernie thinks he has several million people and thinks he can threaten them enough to scare them, I think it's worth a risk, because I think we're in moonshot time right now.
Absolutely.
But more generally, I guess what I'm saying is, at least for me, is I'm not even interested in, look, if somebody tells me I live in Michigan and F them and da-da-da-da-da, I'll give it 5 months to say, you know what, I think it's probably worth the off chance that they'll shut down the concentration camps to vote preventatively. I'm happy to say that.
I don't follow that.
I don't believe that Biden would shut down the concentration camps.
If somebody tells me in a swing state that they're thinking of voting against Biden, I'll take 5 minutes to give them the case that you're making.
Okay.
But to me, the preoccupation of where I'm at right now is, what are the actual questions and lessons and things that we need to figure out to make like the human project viable? And that sounds incredibly melodramatic, but I think that that's where we're at. I think across climate, I think across a whole slew of policies that were already, this isn't just point scoring. Like, the Obama era was obscene for a lot of people who work for a living, people who struggle, people who, what was allowed to happen with Silicon Valley and so on. This isn't just like us having various points on each other on Twitter. It's a critical mass of problems. And I look at Achille Mbembe's piece that he wrote before Trump was elected. The age of humanism is ending. And that is the predicament we're in. And the fact that Joe Biden is certainly not going to answer that is not just a question of degrees or speed or I want it to happen faster. It is a fundamentally different orientation. And so I'm going to have to ask myself, is it even viable, and what needs to be done to secure some type of democratic future? not, again, and I just, that's why I don't even want to spill a huge amount of hours about how people choose to vote or not, frankly, because to me it's not primary. If somebody, and I'll reiterate one more time to those people who are getting pissed, if somebody tells me I'm the one swing vote in a key swing state and F them all, I'll say, you know what, Biden might save 5,000 lives. I think that's totally fair point. But I think that argument and that frame, particularly for people who are absolutely immiserated, is I certainly can't keep doing it. I had someone very close to me, basically, if we weren't a little bit safer now, like, they would just be homeless right now. Like, they would just be done. And there is nothing structurally that Joe Biden and the leaders of the Democratic Party are going to do for that. And they hold clear contempt for those of us that care about those things. And, I don't take it personally. It's not Warren self-care time, but it is have an analysis time. And I don't know what the answers are.
Yep. And we also have to remember, most of the people who are going to stay home and not vote aren't going to be doing that because they heard me talking about it on a podcast. Like,
well, I know.
Most of the people who don't vote.
I think that's I think that argument is like, you can't. We have to operate under the assumption that when we say things on this show, that it's going to have some impact. Because otherwise, then it's not even worth having the conversation.
That's why we're setting parameters.
We just have to.
But there's a much larger number that we need to think about of people who don't vote and don't listen to podcasts. And they are some of the most oppressed people. And a lot of the most oppressed people also can't vote because they're immigrants or because they're incarcerated.
Right.
So that's definitely a limit to the kind of...
But that's different than saying, nobody's going to listen to me anyways, so I'm going to say this.
That's... I only wanted to say that to like minimize the first thing that I was talking about and make a larger point about the people who don't vote and the people who are the most oppressed in this society. And that's why we can't center electoral politics as our primary thing, because you're leaving a lot of the people out who have the biggest stake in what happens and in the outcome. And I think we also need to remember that the way that we got the New Deal, which was a huge advancement in the material conditions in the lives of working class people, it was also a class compromise. It was a concession given in a larger fight because there was revolutionary struggle in this country. They scared the crap out of the ruling class. It wasn't just, oh, I like that guy's policies, I'm going to vote for him and he's going to do them for me. These were concessions in a larger fight. And even as we invoke the names of popular New Deal policies, like the Green New Deal or Medicare, which we've had since 1965, we need to remember the larger piece of the puzzle and how we got those things in the first place. And that is a struggle that can continue and must continue no matter who's president.
But that is actually an argument, though, that you want Biden in office.
Paradoxical.
Because Herbert Hoover was not going to respond that way. FDR didn't run on that, and he may have been, there was probably I don't know if he was there, contemporaneously, if there was an indication that he was open to something like that more than Joe Biden. I don't think Joe Biden has a terribly strong ideological strain. Have
you read the Branko Marcic book on Yesterday's Man?
No.
I think the other problem with that comparison is I actually do think that the modern Democratic Party is actually profoundly ideologically wedded to this kind of third way politics. And the question that I would have for you, and it's it's the very simple, because this is the dynamic that always happens. I remember when the Progressive Caucus, during the healthcare debate, they had a couple days where we're going to hold this up if we don't have a public option. but they could all bank
during
the Obama
Obama
administration, and the Obama could bank.
We have a different progressive caucus now than we did then.
Oh, I'm actually giving them credit, that old lame progressive caucus from my perspective. But part of the dynamic, and I hate how the Obama administration handled healthcare. Fine, of course. But here's part of the dynamic. Joe Lieberman will sink the bill happily because he doesn't give a fuck, excuse my language, if tons of people die. Even your most big hack member of the Progressive Caucus, maybe not all of them, but I think a chunk of them have the mindfulness of what you're reiterating. Could be 2,000 lives, could be 3,000 lives. That matters. And that's progressives, caring about human life is a structural flaw in the exercise of power in a way, and because even if the Democratic Party, I think, definitely has more people that are sort of generally on like the left, even if they voted for Biden, if we're going to take those polls seriously as an example. Certainly they do a very small group of affluent people who are like, never Trumpers or whatever. But part of the dynamic, in addition to their own, I think, very genuine and serious ideology, is that, they know that the Joe Liebermans won't vote for Bernie Sanders and they will screw everything over. And folks on the left a lot of them will get re-anchored in by just basic humanity arguments, which speaks well of the left. But it's hard for credibly threatening and exercising power. And I think that's a problem, which I absolutely don't know the answer to. I'm just putting in the mix that
right.
It's a problem that Joe Biden probably knows that Bernie Sanders would not do that. I think, frankly, if you had a left that this is the last thing I'll say. What frustrates me is get rid of all the tweets about how we're not going to be normal and all this stuff. Like, appeal to normies rhetorically across the board. Let go of the posturing woke and socialist and otherwise. That's my view, even as a socialist. And then conversely, actually have some of the attitude and disposition of no, actually, we won't. And deal with that and sit with that. And, that's kind of where I'm looking at.
That makes a lot of sense. I think we also need to take a page from the French here when they had a choice between a horrible neoliberal centrist and a crazy racist lady member of the far right, right? The motto was vote for Macron, oppose him from day one. And that's what they've been doing. And he has responded like a fascist and shown his true colors, putting down these uprisings with riot cops. Perhaps he was a little better than Le Pen would have been, maybe not. But I think they did the right thing. And now we're seeing uprisings all over France. We've seen the Yellow Vest movement. We've seen massive labor strikes that incorporate all parts of French society. So, French got advanced capitalism before we did, and maybe they're going to be the first ones to advance to something else. But I think we need to look at our French friends and take notes.
Yeah, I think, I guess to me, the question is how do you, obviously, I think there should be a lot more labor action in this country, just broadly speaking, regardless who's the president. But to what extent do you have what is the best way to maintain and grow the power that is behind, Bernie Sanders? He is not going to be there, to lead it for much longer, and it's not clear quite yet who are going to be the sort of the heirs to that movement, or are going to step up and fill that void. We can take some guesses, but the point is, how do you maintain that strength, still play out as much of a chance as you have in this election, and maintain it? That's the balance. Right now, that is the very real question that, theoretically they're asking in Burlington right now, which is, how much do we go at Joe Biden and at what cost to the movement? You can't say, if there's a 35% chance that we can win this, But the only way to get to that 35% is to essentially light our power on fire.
Maybe that's the plausible threat, though. Maybe because, look, yeah, nobody's going to believe that Bernie won't support Joe, but maybe it actually is as simple as, you know, Joe, I'm going to keep running because it's really important, and I expect certain things from you. We'll see. And not just platform things, but actual things. But here's the choice. I am willing to risk absolutely eviscerating you the next several weeks. And you can blame me and blah, 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 blah. But we're still running against each other. It's not like you guys haven't eviscerated me. I'll run every ad imaginable. I'll accept it. MSNBC's upset, whatever. I don't care. Or if we get some things down in writing, we get some actual stuff going on, we can run the next several weeks, but I'll keep calling you my friend and I'll keep saying you could win. Maybe that's where the plausible threat is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, let's say he says, you know, we're waiting now because we're going to stream from Bernie's site. Now, my sense is that this is not going to be an announcement. He's going to end the campaign basically because there's a donate button right next to the right of it. And that would be uncool. In my estimation.
Yeah, man.
So maybe we'll carry it for just a minute or two, but you know, I think what he's going to say is, look, we have a debate coming up. There was 10 one-to-one debates, you know, in 2008, 10 one-to-one debates. I'm just making up a number, but I know there was some in 2016. And we still have more than half the delegates are still out there. I am only down to Biden by less than 200 delegates, which represents less than, you know, about 10% of the number that you need to just win. And I'm staying in, and he's going to say that. Now, he could still say that and drop out tomorrow. I don't think he's going to. I think that at the very least, he's going to stay in for the debate and then for, you know, next Tuesday.
Let me begin by reiterating what I have said from day one of this campaign, and that is that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president in the modern history of our country, and he must be defeated. Tragically, we have a president today who is a pathological liar and who is running a corrupt administration. He clearly does not understand the Constitution of the United States and thinks that he is a president who is above the law. In my view, he is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and a religious bigot, and he must be defeated, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen. Last night, obviously, was not a good night for our campaign from a delegate point of view. We lost in the largest state up for grabs yesterday, the state of Michigan. We lost in Mississippi, Missouri, and Idaho. On the other hand, we won in North Dakota, and we lead the vote count in the state of Washington, the second largest state contested yesterday, with 67% of the votes having been counted. We are a few thousand votes on top. What became even more apparent yesterday is that while we are currently losing the delegate count, approximately 800 delegates for Joe Biden and 660 for us, we are strongly winning in two enormously important areas which will determine the future of our country. Poll after poll, including exit polls, show that a strong majority of the American people support our progressive agenda. The American people are deeply concerned about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality in this country, and the American people want the wealthy and large profitable corporations to start paying their fair share of taxes. Overwhelming support for that. The American people understand that the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. They want to raise the minimum wage in this country to a living wage of at least $15 an hour. And the American people understand that if our kids are going to make it into the middle class of this country, we must make public colleges and universities and trade schools tuition free. The American people understand that we cannot continue a cruel and dysfunctional healthcare system. And it is amazing to me to see that even in conservative states like Mississippi, there is an overwhelming understanding that we are now spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country, while 87 million of us remain uninsured or underinsured. And this crisis, this absurd healthcare system, is becoming more and more obvious to the American people as we face the challenge of the coronavirus pandemic that we are currently experiencing. Imagine facing a pandemic and having 87 million people who are having a difficult time going to a doctor when they need. And the American people know, unlike Donald Trump, that climate change is an existential threat to our country and the planet, and that we need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And the American people also know that we need fundamental transformation of a broken and racist criminal justice system, as well as a cruel immigration system that keeps millions of people living in fear. But it is not just the ideological debate that our progressive movement is winning. We are winning the generational debate. While Joe Biden continues to do very well with older Americans, especially those people over 65, our campaign continues to win the vast majority of the votes of younger people. And I am talking about people not just in their 20s, but in their 30s and their 40s. The younger generations of this country continue in very strong numbers to support our campaign. Today, I say to the Democratic establishment, in order to win in the future, you need to win the voters who represent the future of our country, and you must speak to the issues of concern to them. You cannot simply be satisfied by winning the votes of people who are older. While our campaign has won the ideological debate, we are losing the debate over electability. I cannot tell you how many people our campaign has spoken to who have said, and I quote, "I like what your campaign stands for. I agree with what your campaign stands for, but I'm going to vote for Joe Biden because I think Joe is the best candidate to defeat Donald Trump." End of quote. We have heard that statement all over this country. Needless to say, I strongly disagree with that assertion. But that is what millions of Democrats and independents today believe. On Sunday, I very much look forward to the debate in Arizona with my friend Joe Biden. And let me be very frank as to the questions that I will be asking Joe. Joe, what are you going to do for the 500,000 people who go bankrupt in our country because of medically related debt? And what are you going to do for the working people of this country and small business people who are paying on average 20% of their incomes for health care? Joe, what are you going to do to end the absurdity of the United States of America being the only major country on earth where health care is not a human right? Are you really going to veto a Medicare for all bill if it is passed in Congress? Joe, how are you going to respond to the scientists who tell us we have 7 or 8 years remaining to transform our energy system before irreparable harm takes place to this planet because of the ravages of climate change. Joe, at a time when most young people need a higher education to make it into the middle class, what are you going to do to make sure that all of our people can go to college or trade school regardless of their income? And what are you going to do about the millions of people who are struggling with outrageous levels of student debt? Joe, at a time when we have more people in jail than communist China, a nation 4 times our size, what are you going to do to end mass incarceration and a racist criminal justice system? And what are you going to do to end the terror that millions of undocumented people experience right now because of our broken and inhumane immigration system? Joe, what are you going to do about the fact that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, and are living with the fact that 500,000 people tonight are homeless and 18 million families are spending half of their income to put a roof over their heads? Joe, importantly, what are you going to do to end the absurdity of billionaires buying elections and the 3 wealthiest people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of our people? So let me conclude the way I began. Donald Trump must be defeated, and I will do everything in my power to make that happen. On Sunday night, in the first one-on-one debate of this campaign, the American people will have the opportunity to see which candidate is best positioned to accomplish that goal. Thank you all very much.
Well, it doesn't appear you're going to take questions, and I was going to go to the fun half now, but we need to talk about this. I got to say, I thought he walked that line. I thought that was pitch perfect. It was exactly like all the elements that we were talking about, what he needs to do. He basically, I mean, it was a brilliant move because he's leveraging that stuff in a way that doesn't sound like a threat. By saying, these are the questions I'm going to ask at the debate. When he gets to the debate and asks those questions, it doesn't look like he's doing it to beat Joe Biden. He is basically saying, this is my ask right here. You want to beat me in the debate? Here's the key. Here are the keys that basically lock up this election. You can pick up those keys and you can lock up this election, because if you have an answer for these 10 questions, how do you deal with healthcare bankruptcy? How do you deal with providing healthcare as a right? How will you deal with climate change? How will you deal with the issues around free college option, criminal justice? What will you do with undocumented immigration? What will you do about childhood poverty? What will you do about money in politics and wealth inequality? If you can tell me, you win, right? Like, that's basically what he's saying. Like, you can he just said, here are the keys to the castle. I'm handing them to you, but you've got to take them from my hand. Instead of doing that, like, you know, I mean, it really was the only path you could follow at that point. He is both like leveraging without it making it seem like he's holding anybody hostage. He's just saying, like, here it is. No mystery. You want to beat me? Here's how you beat me. You answer these questions. And if you can answer those questions, then you win. And it's a way of Sanders, you know, walking away with this stuff. Now, of course, it's also a bit of a challenge for Biden because even if he actually had written down answer, we don't know that he could deliver them. But I'm saying that I don't know how you could have done what he just did better.
No, he did it absolutely perfectly. And it, of course, does leave the door open with the stats and, you know, the things he emphasized in terms of key parts of the electorate. He's also saying, look, 90%.
That's the threat.
Yeah, that's the threat. And he's also, and I think the other part of the threat and the 5% or 3% or hell, maybe even 10%, because it will be brutal watching Biden, I think, that this race might come back into play after if a lot of people watch us talking for 2 hours together, and they see, first of all, that you have no answers to any of the substance, and then they see the other things that it's impolite to point out, but is very apparent to anybody that isn't being gaslit. You can't gaslight that. That might put back into play a handful of, some people to say, wait a second, who exactly is the electable one here? So yeah. I thought that was, I agree. I think the synthesis that we were all sort of stumbling for between the three of us, I think he basically did.
And he even made it super, super fair for him by giving him this long to prepare with all of the people helping him out. If he still can't do a decent job answering those questions and, staying lucid, then that should tell you something.
All right. With that said, now we're going to go to the fun half. You can join us in the fun half by becoming a member, by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get all sorts of goodies, but you get the free show free of commercials. You get extra content every day. I'm just uploading right now, actually. Probably we'll have it up shortly. The video of the primary night coverage we had last night. Virgil Texas called in. We had Bobby Big Wheel in studio, Aaron Kleinman, and Nomiki had a little bit of she went on a little bit of a tear. So that was exciting. And nobody got super drunk or anything like that, which, but still, it was fun and it was interesting, and we a lot of sort of the predicate of what we talked about. I think we were a little bit more bummed, I feel, than I think was probably warranted. But I think we were right on the cusp of Michigan. We didn't know what was happening with Washington State. But also, I think it's interesting to compare where we were last night, I think where we are today. But you can check that out. Also, don't forget amquickie.com. You want to get 6 minutes worth of news. Sometimes it's written by Corey Pine. Sometimes it's by Jack Crosby. And Lucy Steiner and I switch off voicing it, depending on if I have to be with my kids or not on any given day. You get a sense of what my schedule is sometimes. Check out amquickie.com, and all that's available on the app at majorityapp.com. Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Tonight is a special night of TMBS, isn't it, Michael?
Indeed. Adolph Reed Jr., the God, read him, will be joining us. Then Liz Franzik, True Anon podcast, will be kind of breaking down all of this and the big questions that we make an attempt to explore on the show. I'm sure a ton more Mandela Warren will be appearing. Folks, you can also go to the homepage at majority.fm and get tickets to live shows we got coming up in Austin and Boston. And someone actually pointed this out to me the other day. When we're live on TMBS, I would watch it on our YouTube channel, but you can actually listen to that on the Majority Report app as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get the whole thing. We'll see you tonight at 7 o'clock.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, a wave of wildcat strikes, blockades, and general militant organizing is spreading across the University of California system based on the demand that academic workers be paid a living wage. We are joined by 3 union members from UC Santa Cruz who were fired for refusing to turn in grades until their demands are met. So with them, we discuss the history of UC strikes, starting with the 2009 occupations that were a precursor to Occupy Wall Street, how the struggle began, the meaning of Bernie's support, their broader political vision, and what lessons the wider working class can draw from it. Patreon.com/theantifada.
I got a plug too. My band is playing tomorrow at the Kingsland in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. We're playing with a touring band called Well Wisher. And if, Jamie, you want to throw to this, I have their audio tree session going. And look, these guys are rocking. So
who's that? Wait, is that?
I literally thought this was a new MR song.
Wait, are these you guys?
No, this is the band that we're playing with.
Where are you?
Where's the video of you guys?
Yeah, where are you?
We are content
Where's
light
Means
right
and
now.
Ways?
We're new. We're getting in the studio next month, so we'll have some stuff.
Who do you
out.
want to shoot it? You want me to direct your video?
I want Audio Tree to direct our video. You can do it. Yeah, you want to do that?
You want a little 90s spin on it?
Yeah, I think that would fit perfect.
Sam will be like, it's like the Cranberries.
We're going to do a lot of like Dutch angles.
Nice. Yeah, some fisheye
I'm sorry.
lenses. And,
You're going to go to the grunge forest.
I'm apologies. I just want to make sure. Have you heard of the Cranberries?
The who?
Okay, all right.
What about the lemon
Ace of
heads?
Base
You probably
thing.
like the lemon heads.
Nah, I wasn't a huge.
They're from Boston.
Yeah, I know.
Who did you like?
I was more like.
Talking Heads guy?
Well, I mean, I liked the Talking Heads when I was in high school, but like
Jonathan Richman.
Well, Jonathan Richman also when I was in high school, but like at that age, it was like Mudhoney and the Replacements. They were basically done, and early Nirvana and Yo La Tango and Uncle Tupelo. I would see a lot, and Buffalo Tom, and
We did a little bit of the
Boston scene.
Replacements in us.
Sure.
Well, soft boy music. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, all this time, I thought you were lame for not knowing about bands, but it turns out you're too cool to know about Ace of Base.
Yeah, I didn't listen to that garbage. No.
Wait. When you say that Ace of Base is garbage, you're insulting
Morphine,
a lot
like
of Eastern
Sandman would play around the corner, and Treater Orange, the Blood Oranges, and Treater Wright got together, and they'd do like a super jam session. Folks, don't forget to check out Literary Hangover too. Bye. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go right to the phones. Very patiently waiting. calling from 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is Jeff from Georgia. How are you?
Jeff from Georgia. What's on your mind, Jeff?
A whole hell of a lot, my brother.
Yeah, I bet.
Honestly, but I'm not going to get to all of that. I'll say what I got to say, then I'll go. When I called you last on Iowa before the votes started coming in, I said to you and to your audience that I thought, and I still think this, that a broad working class movement that's racially diverse helps empower the marginalized people of America, kind of campaign Bernie Sanders is trying to bring about. That's the only thing that's really going to stand up to right-wing authoritarian. And you know, it might sound like I'm saying they're going to lose the election, and they probably will. If they nominate Joe Biden, they probably will do that. But even if they don't, you know, because I don't know how things are going to go. Nobody knows how things are going to go. But I know this, even if their wildest fantasies come true and they drag his fetid corpse across that finish line, I watched liberal reactionary government take over after a hated Republican control in 2008. And I think Obama is a damn sight more competent and better politician than Joe Biden could be on his best day. And we are far from Joe Biden's best day. And in a way, last night was really clarifying to me because nothing's really changed. We don't really have another path forward. But we either energize that movement and try to fight this atrophy about politics that persists in the mind of regular people in this country, or we lose and we give up. Those are our two choices. Well, and whether it happens this time or the next time around, we don't have a choice. We got to fight. We got to fight. We got to fight again.
I will say this:
and we're going to lose, and we're going to lose, and we're going to win.
If Biden does win, and I think that, like, you know, who knows? There's a lot that can happen. Let's just assume for the moment that if Biden does end up getting the nomination, and he does win, and there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. And I think that, like, you know, the economy could be in very big trouble. And without the economy, Donald Trump, I think, is weak. But the difference, and on some level, you know, you're right to draw the parallel between Obama and Biden insofar as, like, you know, one of my concerns was, you know, it is typical for the country, you know, like the reaction to the election of a Donald Trump is just like, get me any Democrat in there who I think can win, and I'll be happy. Just that era is over. But I will say this: the lack of competence, the lack of political skills, the lack of a real strong organization and a heavy hand that relative to the Obama campaign transitioning into the White House is a huge benefit to the left. Barack Obama, when he won the nomination, basically said no outside organization should be getting money. Now, it was a very different landscape in terms of, like, you know, what outside organizations were. They were much more sort of like aligned with the Democratic Party. But even still, he starved all of them because he did not want any outside influence to be organized outside of his administration. He wanted a free hand to be able to operate without the public pressure. That dynamic does not exist today. Joe Biden does not have the ability to starve these organizations of money. One of the things that the Sanders campaign has shown is the ability and the means in which to raise funds and create power that is outside of the control of who the Democratic presidential nominee is or the Democratic president. That is a huge difference. You didn't start hearing people even say anything about Obama, despite the, you know, and granted we were in a crisis at that point, but until I think it was August or September when the bankruptcy bill came around, actually, oddly enough, and the cram down didn't happen to save homeowners. And even then, there was never any type of organization. On day one, regardless of who the president is, if it's Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, or I don't know, Biden gets elected and his VP has to take over on day one. Whoever it is, on day one, that president is going to face a far more organized than in the past left than they have dealt with before. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, some of whom once volunteered for Obama.
Bernie.
We must also, which is another reason why we need to really get the left into shape and rethink and be strategic. But can I just add one thing? And I think it's relevant to what Jeff is bringing up too. And it's not a critique. I think Bernie just did a great job, and I don't think he should do this. But I think I want to get the hashtag Risky Joe going, and I wish the campaign had started weeks ago. Like, it barely got any attention, but Politico reported recently that like Joe's brother's, some healthcare firm he's involved in is like, it's getting probed. And this is not MAGA Justice Department corruption. It is a traditional criminal investigation on what looks like some type of pump and dump scheme. There has to be, and honestly, I mean, I've always been really skeptical of this, frankly, because I've thought from the beginning, like, there's limited utility more so on this show, less so on my show, but limited in this whole landscape, including on TYT, frankly, of like talking about Biden, because people watching these shows don't like, if you polled, I bet Biden would be at the bottom. But particularly, Sam and other folks have any access to cable, like this other element of not convincing the other hosts, obviously, but if you're watching this and the Sanders campaign might have done a bad job of conveying this, but and Ukraine is wrapped up in your perceptions about Trump. But let's go to Joe Biden's brother and the healthcare company. Like, he has a parade of vulnerabilities that are going to be exploited by Trump and does not have the stamina to respond to them. So let's not go at Risky Joe.
Yeah. We need
I just want to finish with this. If people are still feeling bummed out, I want to keep two things in mind. First thing, even if they stop Sanders, his movement's not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We'll still be around. And the second thing is, man, I really hope we get that Suns debate between Donald Trump and Biden. Jesus Christ. If you want to talk about a stop to the left, a sort of bone to throw to us, that's what we want, baby. That's what I want.
We demand single payer and a Hunter Don Jr. debate.
Thank you so much for taking my call, Sam.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff from Georgia. Check out the Dissident Peasant.
The demands are an end to ICE detention, single payer, and Hunter and Don Jr. face each other.
Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Josh from Chicago.
Hi, Josh. How's it going?
I've seen better days.
Yep.
So before we get to getting my mom to vote for Bernie, which I think I hold out hope that she will, I do want to talk about something I observed from the campaign. I think Michael talked about this. I think one of the failures, beyond the fact that I think, Cory Booker, Joe Biden praised segregationists, and Cory Booker was able to fall right in line. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders hurt Elizabeth Warren's fifis, and she can't go and, actually stand for the principles that she talks about standing for. Is, I think, the inability of Bernie's campaign to actually be able to protect what was their base in 2016. And I know you guys have spent a lot of time talking about this, but I think there was just an assumption that that a lot of the people that went for Bernie would go for Bernie again, especially the sort of white, rural, working-class voters. And I think, we did see some signs that they were building out their coalition in Nevada and in Iowa. But and I also think you're right in a sense in that I do think a lot of those voters that went for Biden were actually considering Bernie before South Carolina. And they just kind of needed to be told that, Bernie is the presumptive nominee, and I'm not sure if Bernie could have said something different, maybe more unifying. But I think you saw the landslide of people that sort of went for Biden in terms of the endorsements, and it kind of just was like a signal of okay, we're telling you to vote for Biden, you're just going to vote for Biden. And I think the concern I have with Biden especially, and I'm saying this as someone who is experienced having a family member who has had Alzheimer's, is that there's very clear signs of cognitive decline that go beyond any sort of stuttering. If you watch a lot of the videos.
Well, Josh, I mean, look, I honestly, like, people will have the opportunity to decide that at the debate. Like, I don't want to get into sort of like a clinical analysis of it. I mean, I have, you know, I'm close with people who are going through, that type of cognitive, and even with people who are close to you, it's very hard to sort of make a determination. And I just,
there's a way of not doing ridiculous amateur diagnoses, which none of us should do, and then just saying, like, even if he's lost a step,
reporters
the oil's
are saying
leaking.
That. Everybody's
like,
saying that.
He clearly, everybody can see that. Don't let us be gaslit. And look, of course, in my comedic imagination, do you know how much I want Bernie Sanders to walk out on that stage with an Alzheimer's test kit? But I don't think we could do that. But I think you're right about. I really think, like, just even the frame of 2016 of saying, like, for the next time, we need to really expand and build out our coalition to every corner of the country. Maybe even specifically say the Rainbow Coalition versus too white, too male. Like, that doesn't register well with those folks that did vote in the beginning that you need to keep. Yeah, and there are things like, frankly, like, again, you know, I rewatched the America ad the other day. And I know it's very trendy. Like, I think if one thing we're learning watching all of this is, like, traditional media and cable and stuff like that, as well as obviously first and foremost endorsements matter. That America ad, killer.
Yeah, and I
like
think
things like that matter.
I also think, Josh, and I appreciate the call. Hang in there, man. Hang in there. It's rough.
How do we get my mom to vote for Bernie?
Tell her that Joe's risky.
Well, have her watch the debate. I mean, I think, like, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I don't know how Joe's going to do in that debate, but have her watch the debate and just, you know, I guess, you know, you make an electability argument insofar as that, like, 75% of people, you know, under the age of 25, like 55% under the age of 45. I mean, this is not like, these are not, you know, college kids. You know, 40s, you could say, like, middle-aged people, frankly. And so, like, I think that's a whole lot of people who are a little bit concerned about this.
Can I also make a Monday morning quarterback, which I don't really think he can do anymore? But I would have hard pivoted if I was them, and I should have said this, but I was, you know, whatever. You want to be supportive. Obviously, it goes without saying that Bernie Sanders is against the establishment. The establishment, and I think there is an establishment, and they've been quite active, opposes him. And at the same time, in those moments where he becomes the front runner, I think the message has to start becoming like, I'm now like the leader of the Democratic Party. Like, I'm not against it. We are starting to formally take it over, and therefore I'm going to, and this goes back to the FDR stuff, but frankly, also, let's signpost other people. Fannie Lou Hamer. You know, I am the leader of a Democratic Party that includes awful corporatists and all these people I'm running against, but FDR, Fannie Lou Hamer, like...
Don't say the awful corporatist part.
Well, don't say that. But that's the subtext. That's what you need to stop saying. Yeah. You need to start saying, we are starting to assume leadership of this party. And I think that those signals needed to start really being sent out that this is cool, it's normie, it's okay, and we're good to go.
Yeah, he should be pitching himself as the safe candidate in terms of both beating Trump and in terms of your personal safety. Like, you don't want to get murdered by insurance companies for money. But the last thing I would say to you, Josh, I don't know if you're there anymore.
No.
If your mom wants grandkids, tell her you can't afford to have them unless we get a welfare state.
That's actually kind of true. Imagine if he did, if they started doing, and again, I'm just really spitballing now.
Your parents.
If they came out and they said, you're not going to procreate. No, if he started actually saying, like, not only am I not outside of the mix in terms of the Democratic Party, sure, I have my own idiosyncratic whatever, and I've objected to the modern Democratic Party as so many others have, and that's something we have to deal with. But, you're the one who's portraying the legacy of the New Deal. Like, not me. I'm like you other candidates. I'm respecting this party,
right,
more than any of you.
Right.
I feel like people will understand the desire to have children somewhat intuitively. I hope.
Let's go 972 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Emily in Dallas.
Emily in Dallas. What's on your mind, Emily?
Okay, I'm so glad I got through. I was trying to call you for the last 2 weeks because I kind of wanted to tell you what happened on the ground here with the horrible people that the Sanders campaign brought down here. I mean, it was a shit show. I don't know if I can say that. Can I say that?
Well, it's a little bit late to ask that question now,
Okay.
but go ahead.
All right. Well, I live kind of on the southern side of the Dallas suburbs, which is primarily more black and Latino and all that kind of stuff. And I'm 38, and so I told the people that they brought here, this is way, way, way before South Carolina when we were early voting. And so we do get out the polls, all that stuff. Told them about the changes, told them about all the polling places that were going to close for Houston and for Dallas, and how that, you had to do the early vote. You had to tell people that all the volunteers, how they were going to have to get everybody out. When they started sending people out with that minivan app and we were going door to door, and then they were telling people, okay, well, these college students, and we were going to the doors and everything, they weren't there. But see, because of our voter registration laws that are so horrible, if they were off at their campus, they weren't going to be able to vote for their campus. They would have had to come home to vote because that's where they were registered to vote at. So then we were telling all the Bernie people, these kids aren't going to be able to vote. They're going to have to come back home. They didn't think that it was a big deal, or I don't know what they did. And then we were telling them, all the older black people, they had already early voted for Biden, okay? They said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. We have all these other, subsets of groups that are going to vote. I said, no way. I said, you're going to win. You're going to not win. You're going to lose big. You're going to lose big. I said, you're not going to be able to recover the vote. And I don't know what they were thinking.
But what should they have done?
What do you mean? I don't know what their algorithm was. I don't know what they thought they had right on either the Latino vote. I don't know what they thought they had in the bag.
But I'm asking you what it is that you think that they should have done differently.
They did well. Number one, they were never going to get the older black vote. So what they should have done is they should have reached out to the subset of the younger black community, like myself, and the entrepreneurs. I mean, there's a ton of us. They should have reached out to more of the immigrant population that was from different African communities. They didn't do hardly any of that. I mean, they reached out to Asian communities, but they didn't do subsets of African communities. I mean, they could have done a lot more than what they did. And then when they did do barnstorms and stuff like that for the black community, they sent Latino people. And then it wasn't right. I mean, it was poor planning, and I don't know how it was in other places. I reached out to some people in Harris County, and it was the same thing for them. They said, they didn't do it right. And I don't understand how, if he ran and he ran the same play, I don't get it. I mean, I don't even know if you guys understand what I'm saying, but if he ran and he lost all the southern states and he didn't recover at all, he didn't go down to Mississippi when it was the riots for the prison, he didn't do any of that. Choke Lumumba, he didn't, and then he canceled that yesterday. I mean, and then Jackson, he didn't go do any of that. So that's what happened down here. But I don't know why they thought all of the youth was going to come out. And then they looked at me crazy because I said, you need to make these college kids understand the urgency. They need to drop out. They need to take a year off. I said, you need to tell people like me that have extra guest room, come stay at our guest room, really for you to be able to win. They look at people like, they're like, what are you talking about? I said, you are not going to win unless you really make this like the freedom fighter movement. That's what you have to make this. I don't know. He acted, to me, Bernie Sanders, he acted like he was somewhat like an armchair gangster type of thing. Like he would talk a good game, but then not really put it into action, not really tell his volunteers, which were all these young people, what they really had to put on the line, what they really had to do. That's my opinion.
All right. Appreciate the call, Emily.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure of what the critique was, if it was specifically about the operations or that he wasn't compelling enough as a candidate.
I'm sure there's plenty of mistakes made, but I especially now, I just want to really reiterate for people who people put an unbelievable amount of time into this, and thank you.
I mean,
and also in addition to that, I think that's quite a needle to thread, because you want to actually also tell people that might be really busy and overwhelmed, you can help in such a way that doesn't totally take over your life. I think that's tricky.
And let's be clear here.
Yeah. Most people are not willing to go and drop out for a year for a number of very practical reasons.
Joe Biden had no field operation.
Had none.
He had no offices in any of these places. I mean, and it is the case, however, that the theory of Bernie's campaign was that you were going to bring out these voters that hadn't voted before, and it didn't sort of come to fruition.
And if there's a critique, I think it's going to be more on we're having to talk on the strategy level, the media level, those types of things. I think the field people, I mean, they did so much work, and look, what they did in Nevada is amazing. They've done some real positive work.
Here is Jake Tapper, of all people, who sounds, I think, what is a pretty legit alarm. Now, Donald Trump is not situated in the same way that George W. Bush is, but nevertheless, there is a warning if you look back in past, and here is Jake Tapper to deliver it.
Completely frank, I'm getting real 2004 vibes tonight, which is Democrats want to defeat an incumbent Republican so badly, Democratic voters, I mean, that they decide which one is electable, and they decide, okay, it's John Kerry, or in this case, it's Joe Biden. There's a huge coalescing around that person. They want to end the primary process as soon as possible, and then basically they coronate this person. Now, what did we learn in the last few weeks? Mark McKinnon, former George W. Bush advisor, told me that actually they feared Howard Dean more, because Howard Dean, even though he was less predictable, there was a starker difference between Howard Dean and George W. Bush, and he was drawing much bigger crowds than John Kerry was able to. And Howard Dean, we had him on the Sunday show, and Howard Dean said, "Now you tell me." But the point is that when you have the Democratic electorate deciding that they are all a bunch of Rachel Maddows and Chris Hayes and the like, that they're just progressive pundits, and they're going to pick out who is the best one, maybe they don't necessarily always know what they're doing.
I mean,
wow.
Bernie Bro Tapper.
Now,
blame the electorate, Tapper.
I will say,
co-author.
I would hate to spend 5 or 10 minutes to see if Jake Tapper was one of those people who buried Howard Dean over the screen, but maybe not. But yes, that is the fear, right? Everybody's saying Joe Biden seems like the most electable. I'm not terribly excited about him, but somebody must be. And then everybody turns around and looks around and goes what? No? I mean, look. if you've got this type of overwhelming support, or lack of support, I should say, from young people, the truth of the matter is that it is the vast majority of people who staff these campaigns at the mid-level and on the ground, and really even just above mid-level. There's not a lot of them who are over the age of 45, 50. I mean, there's a few, but there's not a lot. And the fact of the matter is that it's tough to get people out. I mean, Joe Biden is not going to have a tremendous amount of volunteers from his main electoral strength and cohort. People over the age of 65, there'll be some, without a doubt. But they're not going to get out there in the thousands and knocking on doors and getting out there and getting people. I mean, there'll definitely be some. And I say some, this is someone in my 50s. It's like, I don't have the same energy I used to have. Like, do that thing last night, I could do it again today and the next day, 10 years ago. But this is a problem. There's just not the enthusiasm for Joe Biden. There's a lot of like, let's just get this over with. And thank God I don't have to think about this.
Let's just get this over. Joe Biden 2020. Let's just get this over with.
When Joe Biden was asked about what would you do about coronavirus? His response was I just tell him to be quiet, sit back, let your people do it. And I think that is, when Pete Buttigieg said don't you just want to turn on the TV and not see anything about your president?
Yep.
I guarantee it's well, the problem with that is if that's the attitude that people have also towards your campaign, nobody comes out and knocks on the doors. Nobody makes the phone calls. And, it's one thing for that to work in the primary because everybody's just let's just get it over with. But the general is a different animal.
And for what it's worth, yeah, you have the dynamic where, it's a replay of 16, except Donald Trump isn't like an outsider or whatever. He's the friggin' president.
Yeah, I don't know that it's exactly like 16, but this dynamic is very similar. Yeah. And I think it is like 04. And I would say this,
it's mostly
that if you want to show something to your parents, showing them a clip of Jake Tapper, not necessarily the worst thing in the world to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then show them John Kerry report.
He leaves it. Oh my God.
The other part that scares me about that parallel too is John Kerry ran on his being a war hero. And the reasons why he did it at the time, the reason why he did it at the time were, sort of to bring up a juxtaposition between the sort of failed war president, George W. Bush, and that he went AWOL and blah, blah, blah. And the problem with running based upon your personal attributes is those are the easiest things in the world to impeach. And really, you don't even need to impeach them. You don't have to prove anything. All you need to do is just say, the premise and why this guy is running against me, that he has integrity, that he's going to clean up the office, blah, blah, blah. Well, I got news for you. I can make that guy smell just as bad as me.
Yeah, this guy especially.
And I can make that guy smell just as bad as me. And then you're just well, look, they both smell bad, so why should I leave the house?
Joe, your brother's under investigation and your son is on all these corporate boards. I don't know. That's integrity to you? That's bringing honor back to the White House?
And to be clear, when I've made this point on Twitter, people are people aren't going to listen to Donald Trump. Yeah, well, I know they're not going to listen to Donald Trump. They're just going to get ad after ad after ad after ad after ad with clips of just how Joe Biden smells. He smells bad. Joe Biden is running is I smell good. Donald Trump smells bad. I smell good. All Donald Trump has to do at that point is prove to people he smells bad.
And also, I want people to really get in both parts of the left and certainly the resistance world that What is scary to me that I could see anecdotally at least, and I think in some of the new poll numbers, it's not just, yes, there's a base and they are into Trump and whatever, that's it. But I think that people are underestimating the degree to which there are people that don't even necessarily like Donald Trump, but do not view him the way that you view him. They don't think he's beyond the pale. They don't hate him. They don't turn it they actually think they think like I think he's kind of entertaining and occasionally has a point. Now, I also happen to think he's utterly obscene and represents basically like the end of our species. But my point is I think there were people, again, with the George W. Bush parallel, there were plenty of people who thought like, this is an arrogant kid who got us into a disaster overseas. But you know what? I also kind of like him. John Kerry seems like a prick. And I think like that needs to be factored into folks thinking that even with Donald Trump, to the extent there are a handful of people that are sort of floating around, they're not as polarized around him as you are. And that's in the poll numbers. I mean, he's got, upper 40s approval rating. That's a totally plausible number for obviously holding your base and getting some other people to look at you.
Absolutely. And shout out to Jake Tapper for making that critique while utterly concealing the role that he himself, as well as the rest of the media and the Democratic establishment, played in convincing people of that.
A Square. Sam, perfectly pitched, and in light of current landscape, can't imagine anyone doing better than Sanders today. So America, you say he's more electable? Here, I gave him the questions to the test. It also may sound corny, but he did this out of love for brothers and sisters. Another opportunity for America to determine if we can afford to take this risk. Jamie, happy belated. One day we'll call to talk about the need and ways to bring in PMC into the social justice fight. Rogan Meathead Caucus. The Sanders coalition needs to do some soul searching here. If we're honest, we have to admit in 4 years we've made no inroads whatsoever to the black community. For all the talk of class and economic policy pulling people in, does anyone want to bet who won the majority of working class voters between Bernie and Biden? Those critiques are absolutely valid. Absolutely valid.
We need independent working class institutions of social solidarity.
I think those critiques are totally valid, but I think some of the answers to those critiques are going to be some things that people might not necessarily like.
Like, it's not...
That's what I think.
It's not a coincidence.
That's for another day.
Bernie did badly in places with low union density.
Well, the sad part is like low union density is everywhere.
Yeah, that too. But like, if the only institution
South is ahead in that,
for social solidarity, the primary institution for social solidarity in the South, particularly for African Americans, is the church. Now, the church used to be a lot more radical. It's become more conservative since the defeat of black radicalism in this country and the murder of many black radical leaders. So it totally makes sense. But if the left wants to really rebuild, they need some new working class institutions for people to coalesce around.
But that's actually a great example, right? Like, and again, I'll always reiterate, and I think, people who are of good faith listening understand my point, that rights in a substantive sense for anybody are never negotiable and on the table. The idea that you migrate a left message to contemporary, like, as an example, African-American religious voters in South Carolina through like woke discourses generated in Brooklyn is delusional. So like, that's the thing, is that that's true. But some of the way you're going to migrate to those like broader communities is definitely not by doing the same things that folks in a small group are used to and are comfortable with. And the real thing to thread is, how do you circumnavigate between thinking in a much larger way, getting out of your bubbles and really appealing to people, and then also recognizing where there are areas that are red lines you can't cross, even if you're, 1% out of 100, right? That's the dialectic we need to play with. But it's funny when people make those critiques. It's like, yeah, I think it's 100% true, but it's not like doubling down on, bougie woke liberal stuff. That is not, because again, if that was what was bringing those voters over, then Elizabeth Warren would be getting coronated right now. Like, that's not where things are at. Joe Biden gets a lot of those voters because folks either don't care about that stuff, have no relationship to that language, and actually in some areas just frankly have pretty conservative politics. The black electorate, like any other electorate, is diverse.
Can you give an example of what you're talking about?
We get too much to go through here. That's for another day. Pajama Boy, I'm disappointed that we haven't talked about Michael Tracy going after Brooks in Majority Report a week ago. Majority Report lives rent-free in Tracy's head. To be totally honest with you, I had no idea. Did you? No, but that's what rent-free means. Send us. Well, no, I don't know what rent-free means. But
no. I would like to, in the spirit of the national crisis we're in.
What did he do? What did he say?
Apparently I'm a big Russiagate guy or something. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
true,
remember.
actually.
I'm huge. I mean, I think frankly, if you really want to be real about why Bernie's losing, it's because of Russia.
Oh,
that New York Times article. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying. Look. Honestly,
somebody send me the link. I'd like to see that.
I personally am like so not interested in that kind of like Twitter.
He's probably bummed because the now that like people got tired of him talking about Russia, there was really nothing else. He's going to have to go out.
I also think you got to guard. I think Michael was right about some of that stuff, and he should take the W, bro. But honestly,
take the W now. Move on and go and try and get into a fight with someone, an elderly woman, to see if you can get back into the news. Christo, Bernie Sanders movement has an electoral needle to thread, and maybe he will still do it. The truths expressed that we all see as self-evident need to be made plain as day to the truth-resistant moderate voter. The Sanders policy position needs to be seen as both a legacy and inheritance from an older Democratic Party, while at the same time as an ambitious promise to a new generation. The old is new. The paradox needs to be made plain. The way paradoxes of truth to test reality, we must see it on a tightrope. When the verities become acrobats, we can judge them. Stale Nate. Canvas yesterday in KC for the first time taught me we have much left to learn in reaching the working class voters I talked to. Only Bernie people I talked to were former Warren supporters. One potential Bernie Latino voter didn't have a lot of faith in electoralism. Others didn't know a primary was happening, and one older immigrant family just wanted the Trump madness to end and were leaning Biden. Most people I talk to like Medicare for all. We have a lot of work to do. It's not hopeless. Jen with Owen. America is unbearable. Biden insults and curses at voters. Regular guy in Michigan is considered a nice guy. Bernie critiques the institution of power. Is considered mean and scary. Bravo-matic. What would happen if Biden asked Bernie to be his VP? Everyone would say, oh, my God, we need someone under the age of 75 running on our ticket. Furious and furiouser. There aren't going to be uprisings here against Biden. We're a country of bootlickers, and the cops have guns. Okay.
We'll see about that.
Mouty Mouse. What's the issue with the staff being Latino? I agree Bernie shouldn't have done more to get black vote in the South, but really, what does that have anything to do with anything? I see what you're saying. Snow. Been trying to use the app to call in, keep getting the message, not accepting calls. That's right, because we have 50 people on the line. Sleepy Joe. Speaking of 90s bands, I got all the way into Luna again after Sam mentioned them a long while ago. I even saw them play Penthouse last fall in St. Louis. They still got it. Good on you, Sam. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Luna and Galaxy 500. Still like those guys. H-Dub, young people understand the urgency of the campaign and the urgency of being able to eat now and in the future. Gulfstream 2, Jamie, I mostly agree with you, but the long-term effect that another Trump term is the Supreme Court. Colorado guy, the biggest obstacle for Bernie and Biden, respectively, are each other. Obviously, Bernie has 70% of the voters below the age of 45. Biden has 70 of the 65 years and older. What's the best argument that each respective campaign has to win over the other's voting bloc? I don't know. Binder Dad, telling Bernie to pack it in and cuck to Biden would be like telling the 2004 Red Sox to quit after falling behind to the Yankees 3-0. David Mailman, the over-under is 80 in Vegas for Mike's appearance on the show this year. I took the under. Jude from Connecticut. Hey, Sam, I have 6 years left before military retirement and would love, once out, to run for office and carry on the fight. Bernie can't carry the torch forever. But I know I don't know enough. Any chance for some kind of MR boot camp product we can talk you into creating? What can I be reading? What can I be doing to make sure I'm as ready as I can be when I find the place where we can jump into the fight? Well, we have just the MR book club that the Goodreads, and if you go through and read from all the guests that we've had on the show, you will be very well informed.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you mean it like logistically. I mean, everything Sam just said, but I interviewed Isaiah James the other day, who is one of these candidate who I believe in and is running in Brooklyn and is really compelling case. And he went to lobby Yvette Clarke. He was not satisfied with her attitude towards his, the constituency interests he was representing, I think as a housing advocate. Went home, was complaining, and his wife was like, well, you better figure out something to do about it. And he said at 2:00 in the morning, he was on Google looking up how to run for Congress. So apparently you can do that. You can go, yeah, there's a logistical process.
There you go.
Get into it. Yep.
Let's go to, here is Donna Brazile trying to make a case on Fox and Friends, I guess, for Joe Biden. I still am trying to get over her tweet of Wall Street and Main Street need to get along. And
not good.
And this is, this is part of the problem, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, look, certainly one of the values I think we see in Biden that I could just say, as opposed to Trump from the perspective of the left, is I definitely think the left gets more vigorous during, with a like a centrist Democrat in office, because I think like the stark difference becomes you no longer have this like we've got to get this guy out. It becomes more like we can actually look at the policies that constitute the difference between what a Democrat is or could be.
Yeah, and Biden is a lot worse at smoothing over those rough edges than Obama.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And honestly, I think today, because of material conditions, like some of Obama's speeches, you go back in the archive, there would be a contingent of folks today it wouldn't work on anymore. Just because of the changing conditions.
Like I say, the changing conditions, and also the left grew under Obama. Like this, like an actual left. Here is Donna Brazile on Fox and Friends.
He's a man of passion. I've known Joe Biden. I was 27 years old. I went home to Louisiana. I thought about going to law school. I got a phone call from Joe Biden. Joe Biden is someone who cares. He will speak his mind. He will tell you things that you look at him and you're like, I have to tell you, I went to the White House 3 months after Joe Biden became vice president. And he sat me down and he looked at me. Come on, we're doing this thing. We're doing the Biden thing, right? And he said, let's have a black on black discussion. I looked at him and I'm like, I'm black. Joe Biden speaks from here, okay? Sometime when you speak from here, you don't get it right, but guess what? He is a man of...
Pony soldier?
Oh, I've never used those words, okay? The combo, but come on, who are we comparing him to, right? Himself. I want to address one other issue.
You're going to tell me Joe Biden from 10 years ago would have been telling at least 4 people not to vote for him?
Are you an expert? Are you an expert on cognitive disabilities? I've heard so many people talk about cognitive disabilities. Joe Biden.
You knew him 10 years ago, so
I knew him 30 years ago.
So you're going to tell me he would have done those same things he would 10 years ago?
Joe Biden is a man of passion, and I don't think that auto worker took offense to what Joe Biden.
We just had him on.
Joe Biden was talking about.
All right, here's the thing. I actually don't think that it's going to work for the right. If Joe Biden becomes the nominee, I don't think it's going to work for the right to say he's got cognitive problems, that he's lost a step. The issue with Joe Biden losing a step is one that should worry Democrats, because he's not going to be able to do the things in the campaign that are going to allow him to beat Donald Trump. I actually think when you get into the general election, they can say Sleepy Joe and this and that, but that's not going to depress anybody's votes to go vote for him. If you don't like Donald Trump, it's not because you are like, you're deciding like, I feel that Donald Trump has lost a step and that's why I'm going to vote against him. Like, that's not the reason that's motivating you. So you can't depress the vote for Biden by saying he's lost a step. Well, they've both lost a step. I'm not going to go vote. That's not going to be the issue. The issue with Joe Biden's having lost a step is a concern for Democrats, because there's actual real world implications when you're running for office, that you want someone to be vigorous, to be able to run against the other guy. But it's not going to be a critique that the right is going to weaponize, be able to, I think, successfully weaponize.
I think, though, if we think of it as each margin counts, it's another thing that just reinforces, like you talk about depressing the youth turnout. Like, in addition to everything else, you know, I mean, it already is a meme for people who, you know, look at this.
I know, but I still think that,
I don't think it's going to be, look, I think the overwhelming case, and this is an amazing thing about the Trump era, is that the most corrupt administration in history, I think the case is going to be, look at what his brother's doing. Look at what his son's doing.
Exactly. That is going to be a far more effective way of suppressing the vote. Definitely. With Joe Biden. And they're going to do it with Social Security too.
Yes.
They're going to get to the left of him. That's where all the critique is, because all they want to do is keep the margins of the Democratic Party, margins in terms of like Social Security, maybe some of the older folks, margins in terms of like people who are in the anti-corruption thing, or just see all politicians as, trade is another one. They're just going to try and pick off on those margins. And that's going to suppress the vote. I actually think that, like, frankly, it would be just as effective for Joe Biden, in the general, to just be like, to totally lose it and get the vote of like, I just want to see what happens if you put a guy like that in the White House. Like, that's part of what drove Donald Trump's vote.
Absolutely. And honestly, the first half of like what she's saying there, to me, like, there have been clips that people have run around with that may be in a Democratic Party, but like, honestly, like, when he called that guy fat and challenged him to push-ups, I'm not saying it wasn't obnoxious and wrong, but I did not watch that and think, man, what a disaster. I watched that and I was like, you know what? There's a lot of people that are going to watch that and be like, oh, the guy was insulting his son.
That critique is exclusively a Democratic primary critique because it gets to the heart of whether he can beat Donald Trump. In the general election, people aren't assessing Biden's ability to beat Donald Trump. They're either going to vote for him or not because of a whole other set of, they're making a determination between those people. And so they're, Fox and Friends got the wrong memo on that.
Well, how do you think it's going to play in the general, that video of Biden shushing a working class union guy who's concerned about gun rights?
Disaster.
For
the general.
For the general?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I think maybe the gun part, but I think the going up into his face and saying,
I think generically going up into his face is
and
not
saying
bad.
you're full of shit, man. I think that,
because actually, in a way,
I don't think that hurts him.
In a way,
you don't think the right weaponizes aggrievement well still?
I think it's because of guns. Like, honestly, if that guy got up there and said, like, you don't support union rights, I don't think this guy would be on there.
No, and you know what? And you know what's interesting?
There are a lot of organized laborers who voted for Trump.
Because you know what's interesting is that when I saw a devastating Trump ad on a YouTube channel a couple weeks ago, and it was brilliant because it's literally just a montage of a bunch of arrogant assholes on TV making fun of Trump voters. It's Don Lemon and Rick Wilson like, oh, I don't even know where Ukraine is. And it's honestly, it is disgusting and repulsive to watch. And the last is, it's just, they don't respect you, Trump 2020. It's an amazing ad. And I think, though, a lot of it is, funnily enough, I mean, the content is gross, but it really is that liberal, like, I think a weird advantage that Biden has is actually that he is like, it isn't like, you don't know my policy set.
Right.
It's like, you're full of shit, Jack.
Right.
But will people see through it is the question. Like, especially when you pair it with his policies and with liberals laughing at Trump voters.
I think you're already doing much more work than most of the voters do. I don't think people are thinking about that one way or another.
I think the gun stuff is not helpful, frankly.
The gun
stuff is super not
Let's
helpful.
play this video here. This guy. Now, we look at this guy as a union guy, right? On Fox and Friends, they're not bringing him on because he's a union guy. They're bringing him on because he has the "Don't Tread on Me" hat that he's wearing. They're bringing him on because he's talking about gun rights.
Well, I think it's all those things.
I can tell you, take that hat off his head, have him for gun restrictions. If he went up to Joe Biden and said, your anti-gun, your gun control positions are not strong enough, and Joe Biden said, get out of here, man, you're full of shit. If he had said that, I would bet you any bit of anything that he would not be on Fox and Friends today. And without a doubt, I mean, just without a doubt, here is Fox and Friends interviewing that dude.
What's your message to America? What do you want people to know about the average voter, middle America, the southern states?
And the Midwest.
Good.
And the Midwest.
I want them to know that love goes a long way. And if you're actually able to listen to each other, left, right, or center, actually take the time to listen to one another and try to come together with something, because a split America is not a good America. Most people lived in the 80s, 90s, even before then. They know just in that short time away, America was much better. Trump is doing a great job in building that back up. But when it comes down to it, there is something that is splitting us apart, and it's not okay. Black, white, Asian, we are all American, and we need to stand united as citizens.
What? Donald Trump has really brought us together in a lot of ways, right? I mean, black, white, Asian. He's really. I mean, he sounds to me a little bit like he's pushing some type of white nationalism. Actually, that is like, you know, he's saying, or I should say, civic nationalism. Right? That's the sort of the Bannon-esque thing. He's saying, like, you know, I'm including these groups, but we need to stand together as one. Well, like, against whom? Like, against what?
I will say this. I think that there is. I mean, look, you know, I don't know about this specific case, but I do think that there is a non-elite version that you see in very different varieties, certainly among certain kinds of liberals, but even among certain kinds of conservatives, of a sort of, we all need to get along better message. I think that is actually a real thing out there. And I think it's so amorphous and vague in a way that what people mean by it is, you know, is obviously radically different. But I think there is a weird parallel track between an elite discourse on getting back together and a certain generalized one. And I haven't put my finger on it yet. I still would tend to think that, you know, look, the Bernie version in a general election of let's get together as the 99% is more effective overall than let's get together as one particular political party. But I've heard a lot of stuff like that from many different quarters. It's interesting.
What else did I have here? Oh, did we do the? Yeah, let's play this. Donald Trump is very, very concerned. Has an interesting, I should say, perspective on what to do with the illness that is spreading around the country right now. Here is Donald Trump saying that we must protect the children. No, I'm sorry, the elderly. No, I'm sorry, the oil industry.
And we're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm. It will go away. We want to protect our shipping industry, our cruise industry, cruise ships. We want to protect our airline industry, very important. But everybody has to be vigilant and has to be careful. But be calm. It's really working out, and a lot of good things are going to happen. The consumer is ready. The consumer is so powerful in our country with what we've done with tax cuts and regulation cuts and all of those things. The consumer has never been in a better position than they are right now. So a lot of good things are going to happen. Thank you very much.
Can you imagine going in and having your doctor walk into your room and just go, and how is the consumer feeling today?
I got your 401k right here. It looks real good.
Now, I know you've got some bleeding and some pain. And are you aware that there has been a 50 point basis point drop, and it's time for you to refi? Did you? And incidentally, I know that your lungs have filled up with fluid. But did you realize the breaks you can get right now on a cruise? Maybe down to the.
I heard it's unbelievable. Round trip to Hawaii under $300. It's really unbelievable. Oh. So there's a lot of positives.
So many good things. It's all gonna go away. It's all gonna go.
You know what I would do? I would take that cruise right now you've always dreamed of but could never afford.
Gonna go away.
It's unbelievable. Only in the Trump economy.
Folks, Don't worry though. I know there's probably the sense of like, oh, we're in the midst of.
Wait, did Brendan have a? I thought Brendan had something.
We're in the midst of a potential, international world problem with health, but what we need is leadership that has like a contingency plan, just in case it doesn't all work out. Well, fortunate for you, Donald Trump is our president. And if you want contingencies, good news, folks. He's got contingencies.
Have you been briefed that up to 100 million Americans could ultimately be exposed to the virus?
I've been briefed on every contingency you can possibly imagine. Many contingencies, a lot of positive, different numbers, all different numbers, very large numbers, and some small numbers too, by the way. Look, right now, I guess we're at 26 deaths. And if you look at the flu for this year, we're at 8 million. We're looking at 8,000 deaths, and hundreds of thousands of cases, but we have 8,000 deaths. So you have 8,000 versus 26 deaths at this time. With all of that being said, we're taking this unbelievably seriously.
That was like last week when do you remember we were doing that riff on like when he said he was just like, I mean, it's really low. And then if you think of like the people who just like don't go to work and then they're fine, it's probably even lower. Those aren't included in the numbers. And we were just like picturing like the WHO, like one of the only like remnants of like the halcyon days of the UN system, and international institutions, just like these doctors from Ghana and Sri Lanka and, or wherever. And they're in Switzerland and they're just like, we had not considered the like, you just don't show up and it's okay number. So we really need to revise our whole model, the data set. Like Trump's just like, yeah, the scientists and the doctors, they just don't think of every variable.
Thanks for inviting me here because my uncle went to MIT. So it's really, I'm used to this. This is very comfortable for me. The whole thing here is very comfortable.
It was very important for us to be humble and realize that we were not including the like people who were sort of fine and just like didn't go to work variable. So
I like you.
Yeah,
you're good.
Like you
you're
too.
A good guy.
Basically, wash your hands if you must. But this really is not such a big deal in a certain sense, and many contingencies. Everybody in the world, like the Italian prime minister, is like, "Yeah, we are on a lockdown, but it is also okay." In a certain sense, go, take a boat.
Look, listen. There's a lot of people who are feeling a little lack of confidence because of the leadership that we have in this country. In this type of crisis. And one of those people who sits on the committee, who is the Blue Star Commission that is dealing with this this increasingly transmitted virus, is of course Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow, of course, is the steady hand on the rudder of our economy. And let's take a close-up look at Larry Kudlow as he stands behind Mike Pence and tries to stay awake on his feet. And stay awake is probably like would imply that it's lack of sleep as opposed to like, everybody could, some people could be taking
one for me or for Corona. Corona.
There is a theory out there that you could take prophylactic cough medicine. And here is Larry Kudlow just standing behind, just like trying to give everybody confidence. That's why they stand behind Mike Pence. Just want to make you know we're all here, just in case one of us falls. There's going to be someone to pick us up.
With those states, we'll be publishing CDC's recommendations.
Look at the
for what ought to be done. But I want to
blinking eyes like this. Whoa!
I think the most important thing is that we didn't bring facts forward to the people, and that our proposals and our recommendations, while All of these apply to everybody in the United States, and it'll help reduce the infection rate of the coronavirus. That for those communities that are being impacted, we're going to develop
go to sleep.
for them. Dr. Fauci?
Oh, I got it. Squeeze. There we go. Look, we're gonna be fine. What we're coming out with is a news. We've done a lot of research, and of course, you have. We're telling people you got to put the hand sanitizer on. It's got to be 60% alcohol. Another thing you can do is put some 80 proof in your mouth. And therefore, the virus, it hits your lips, dies.
It's just fast. Masks, don't buy them. We need the mask for the and if you buy a mask, it's pseudoscience. So what you do is you drink a bottle of scotch, and it kills it. I've also heard, and we're working on this, but
vodka,
medical use of cocaine, cocaine and baking soda,
gin. We can rub a little gin around your lips and into your
A lot of people have asked, will beer do the trick? No, it won't.
It won't.
It's a pearly great drink. We love American beer companies. They hire black workers, which are doing a great job on, but it's not going to kill the virus. That's Glenn Cooley. It's vodka in my tummy. Down goes the vodka, by goes the virus.
I'll switch that around. Of course, kids can't do it. We gotta work on the kids. But in the meantime, very important once we get that, we're gonna, and of course we're working on the contracts right now to have the shipments. So
we have contained this. I won't say airtight, but pretty close to airtight.
That's the thing. We don't need it airtight. That's the alcohol will kill it. That is the thing that you need to just keep in mind. Just everybody, take a drink. Everybody relax. Maybe sit back. Just watch the stock market go up. That's basically it.
I was gonna fly. I said, "Hello, Chinaman. How many They think they're holding us hostage because they've got all of our farmer drugs. We're holding them hostage because we should be flying moonshine and to dump over Wuhan province."
He clearly has not heard the urban legend that cocaine keeps you safe from corona.
Frankly, to be fair, as people say, and I hate that term, but to be fair, I think I make similar faces when I'm listening to Mike Pence speak.
Yes, that's maybe true. Let's listen to what happened when Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's the doctor from the CDC, right? Is he? Allergy. Like the allergy, like a division of basically the communicable diseases, if you will, from the CDC.
And exorcisms. Don't forget exorcisms.
And he is on with Sean Hannity. And Sean Hannity, of course, has been telling folks like, look, this is no big deal. You don't have to worry about it. And yet, then the good doctor comes on and says, ruins the party.
Important question. So the average age mortality for corona is 80. So this virus is impacting people with compromised immune systems. Underlying other medical conditions are the most vulnerable. What about the other 99%? If people got the virus, worst case scenario, how dangerous is it to them compared maybe to the regular virus?
Pause it. Now, you see what I mean? This is such a bizarre sort of like, I mean, the belief that they seem to have on the right, that they can just convince people this is not real. First of all, that notion of like, we're going to bet that people won't experience it that much. But it is so dangerous the way that they are doing this. Like, this could have been, we could have responded this to in a way based upon what we're seeing out of North Korea. I mean, excuse me, South Korea, and even in China. We could have responded to this in a way that could have made this like maybe a 2-month thing. Like we flattened the curve very quickly. It would have been, people are getting sick, but it wouldn't be something that could potentially, sort of jam up our hospitals and we're 10 days away still from when this is going to start to be very, very, very problematic. And we're going to start to see reports all around the country about this. And they could have handled this in a responsible way, but they're pushing this and they don't seem to realize that when they do this, like we're going to have a situation where it's quite possible that you're going to be able to track clusters around the viewership of Fox News. Because once it gets out there, like if we progress in the way that this is progressing, like in Italy, we are like a month or two away from 4 million people being infected. And the mortality rate is going to be a function of the ability of local hospitals having like an expanded capacity. And it is quite possible that in 3 or 4 months, we're going to be able to look at a map of the United States and we're going to see increased mortality rates that correspond to the viewership of people like Sean Hannity and the listenership of like, Mark Levin. And they don't seem to get this. They just don't get it. And so here's Sean Hannity trying to set this up. 99.9% of people, it's not going to be a problem. The average age is 80 of the people who have died. Now, what
about the Fox audience, bro?
No. The reason why, let's be clear here. The reason why the mortality rate, the age is that high is because it just ripped through in Washington State, a nursing home. That's why he's able to say it's 80, because it just literally obliterated a nursing home.
It's a statistical anomaly that will be fleshed out when this spreads more widely.
Indeed.
Is it to them compared maybe to the regular virus, regular flu?
But, okay, so that's a good question. About 80% of the people who get infected will do well. They'll get sick. They're going to be uncomfortable. They're not going to feel well. But they're going to spontaneously recover. About 15% of them, according to the data from China, Korea, et cetera, that those are individuals that are going to get into trouble. And the mortality in that group is very high. But Sean, to make sure your viewers get an accurate idea about what goes on, you mentioned seasonal flu. The mortality for seasonal flu is 0.1. The mortality for this is about 2.5%. It's probably lower than that. It's probably closer to 1. But even if it's 1, it's 10 times more lethal than the seasonal flu. You got to make sure that people understand that.
No.
Yeah, no. I'm not downplaying it, even though I'm downplaying it. Like the doctor's there and he's going, like, I wonder, like, what goes through this guy's mind where he's like, I can't believe I'm on a television program brought here to warn Americans as to what they should be doing about this. And I am faced with a guy who is professionally downplaying this.
Yeah, who let that guy on?
They on some level, they sort of like, he thought that he could just sort of like try, like they're oblivious.
Like I've actually seen, I did see, Tucker last night was just like, this is actually really serious.
Well, Tucker probably like reads, like Sean Hannity does not read.
Look, it's an agenda. In this case, this specific policy is actually correct. It is correct to link it to not xenophobia about China, but be like, why do we rely on pharma exports from China for this? That is correct. Incidentally, I've also read that there's good treatments from Cuba, but we can't access them.
That's right. Yeah, there is a like an analog to Tamiflu.
Yeah,
I think that of course we have now a reinstated.
I like the difference
embargo.
Between the don't panic, which is always advisable, versus like just go in crowds like the flu. Don't even wash your hands. Live a little.
And that sort of narrative from Hannity makes all these people like Fauci look like alarmists. Like they can't help but raise alarm at this point. It's like, no, you're not listening to me. It is a problem. This is serious.
Well, the idea of a mortality rate of 10 times the flu
is a lot of people.
We lose anywhere from like what 40,000 to 70,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
A year.
Now, how many of
And
these
we have the
people are potential Trump or Biden voters? I think we need to start digging into these numbers.
It's
And we have like vaccines for the flu.
Well, we have vaccines for the flu. I mean, that's what theoretically keeps it from like, you could talk about percentages but if you're talking about like sort of like raw numbers, yes, theoretically, the number of people who are, it may not happen this year. We don't know if this is going to recur every year. They don't know yet. And if it just keeps going around or, dies out on its own, we just don't know. But this is on top of everything. And the big problem is too, is that we just don't have the capacity. And if this all hits like a wave, as opposed to sort of like a flatter, sort of like rising of tide, if it comes in as rising of tide, there's going to be, there's going to be mortality and there's going to be sickness, but it's not going to be catastrophic. But if it comes in like a wave, we just don't have the ability to, our healthcare facilities capacity is just not flexible enough to sort of like deal with it. We just don't have the number of respirators. We don't have the number of beds. And the whole idea is, I mean, that's why they're telling people like keep the distance, because the idea is that like, you don't want to get this. There's a certain inevitability that a certain number of people are going to get it. You don't want to get it in March. You want to get it in July.
And not the primary problem right now, not drawing an equivalency, but to say you would veto Medicare for all in the middle of this it's demented.
It's disgusting.
I mean, disgusting, immoral, ridiculous, but it's actually, if you wanted to take it at the technocrat, like, what can we learn from this as we face a world of increasing threats like this? That is just if they were properly functioning as non-ideological technocrats, they would embrace this policy. And that's why I'm very clear that, to me, there is a lot of ideology operating.
It's also just sort of like insane from like just like a purely partisan way. It's like, you're going to veto a bill that the hypothetical Senate controlled by Democrats with Chris Coons and Joe Manchin and Mark Kelly, and you're gonna veto what? Like, that's what I want to know. I want to know. The next question should be asked is, what else are you gonna veto? Like, would you veto the Green New Deal if it passed?
Yep.
Both houses.
Yep.
By Democrats? Would you veto universal pre-K? Would you veto free college? Would you veto like expansion of Social Security? Like, where would you draw the line that you would buck your own party? I mean, it's a bizarre. It's a
and
gotta
it's just
keep those stock prices up.
And it's just, again, right, and that is where like.
All right, we got a lot of people hanging on. All right, we're gonna have to just pick a number. I'm sorry, folks. We got a lot of people online. I know people have been holding for a long time. Let's just. I'm going to take one from the top 6. How's this? Calling from an 860 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is that me?
Yes, it is. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sean from Connecticut.
Sean from Connecticut. You are the final caller on the program today. What's on your mind?
Awesome. So I don't know. I mean, so I'm 24, so I'm pretty young. And in 2016, I was all about, Bernie lost, that sucks. But I was like trying to rile people up for Hillary. It was kind of hard, not like she was helping too much. And this time around, once it became Biden versus Bernie, it was really difficult to the whole fool me once, fool me twice type thing, where it's like, do I really have to vote for Biden? And I've always been the kind of person, I grew up going to Catholic school, right? And so with that, there's the nuns and the teachers that are kind of just there, they're kind of just there. It felt like, as a kid, I was always like, oh, these aren't really even teachers. They're just reading from books, telling me stuff about God. And then, I don't know how to describe. Sorry, it's my first time calling in, so it's a little weird. But So always being kicked out of class and being sent to the principal's office, but it's not like making fart jokes in 4th or 5th grade with 3D political chess. But if we reelect Trump, it's not just me going to the principal's office. It's not even the establishment supporters, people who are or the mainstream media. It's the people that Bernie's fighting for that will be screwed over the most. I genuinely think that less people will be hurt under Biden than Trump. And so it is still it's not me, it's us. Even though it feels like a spit in the face from the establishment like that. And I was just wondering, I've been in my own head for the past 2 weeks. So I kind of just wanted to dump that out and see.
I think that's that's personally my feeling as well. I think the real question is, though, how can we both hold that sense in our heads that, and look, there's no guarantee that if Bernie Sanders became president, you would get Medicare for all. And certainly if it came down to it and you couldn't get Medicare for all, but you could get 20,000 lives saved annually because you were able to insure, X number of people and make it this much cheaper. I don't think anybody would say forget it. It's all or nothing. If Bernie Sanders was president. And by that same logic, you also have to think that there's no doubt Joe Biden's going to go in there and do things differently than the Trump administration, which right now could crash the entire, Affordable Care Act and the Medicaid expansion and whatnot. And so you're talking thousands. But then, the question is how do you maintain that? But still, while there's a chance for your candidate to win, how do you also sort of leverage the potential? And in some ways, look, I would rather that this moment happens now than in June, because now you have a little bit more latitude to sort of say I'm going to leverage this right now. And because then you're still 6 months out, any type of threats or the way that you make a threat in this instance. I mean, that's why I thought Bernie's statement today was actually exceptional. He basically said, he's basically signaling to the establishment, if Joe can answer these questions, not just respond to them. Well, it's really two-part. One, if he has the ability to respond, he needs to show the ability to respond because he needs to be able to run for president in September. And we're only in March. But if he can answer these questions and give us some indication that he has some flexibility on these things, and I don't know where Bernie Sanders draws the line, and I think probably everybody has their own sort of different individual of what would be satisfying. I think, nothing that Joe Biden's going to say, I think, is going to be even remotely close to fully satisfying. But if he can move on some of these things, if there is some material benefit that can be pulled out of Joe Biden, for Bernie Sanders saying we can end this earlier rather than later, then I think that there's value there. And I think
they need to be really to the extent it's possible, not just rhetoric. It needs to be profoundly clear commitments. And the other thing is that we also know when you look at 2016 Joe Biden, not only is he clearly in a different place mentally and physically, he's echoing Sanders' rhetoric pretty significantly, actually. And it would be, look, in his own way, he's not, but he's talking when he went to the White House lawn and announced he wasn't running for president. And we, at the time, we said there's contradictions in this. He definitely talked about bringing people together and all of that for sure. But he talked about income inequality, an affordability crisis across the board, and a shrinking middle class. So, one, I say that to caution because it needs to be actual commitments to the extent that's possible. And two, he does know how to do that if he chose to on a rhetorical level.
I think he used to know.
I think the idea is this. If Bernie gets him to say certain things in this debate, right? And like, we were talking about this last night where we were saying like, Bernie should just come out and say, I've spoken to Joe Biden and he has agreed to put, to make Nina Turner vice president or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not suggesting, I'm just using this as an example.
I actually am. I think that's a good example.
Okay. But if he came out and just lied
right.
and said, and therefore I am stopping my campaign. And then when Biden didn't do it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now you've broken the deal. And Biden's like, I never made that deal. But obviously you can't do, I don't think you can do that.
I would.
But what you can do is say these things to me, Joe, on national television. Say to me on national television that, we're going to, whatever it is, I don't know where the line is, but we're going to give you A, B, C, and D. You said it to me on national television. At the very least, what Sanders is setting up, and this is the very least, is an explicit expectation out of this administration that was not there with the Obama administration. Like, only the public option. And you look back on this, the cram down on the bankruptcy bill, you're too young to remember this, but the cram down on the bankruptcy bill was something, but that was for more people who are really paying attention. But the big thing was the public option. And if you look at that public option and see how that's been leveraged by people in terms of this fight for Medicare for all, the fact that we were denied the public option, even though it would have impacted at the time, literally maybe a million people. Maybe a million people. The fact that that public option was lacking became a huge tool for building strength on the left to push for Medicare for all. And I think, that's what Bernie is looking to do. Get public commitments from Biden, not necessarily with the idea that Biden's going to, actually carry them out, but creating the expectation amongst the electorate that they should be carried out.
I still think
because if Biden does answer in the affirmative to those questions, we're going to know that he's lying. And then we're going to see that he's lying when he doesn't carry them out. And that's when the huge grassroots network that grew up around Bernie Sanders hopefully reactivates and pushes him as hard as they can.
Well, in my mind, I hope that that what actually happens is that people take, that Biden, if he does say those type of things, they become fuel and energize movements to push for it, and that it continues through, and that the leverage is that movement exists, and it puts pressure on them to actually deliver it. I mean,
the only thing I'll add to this, and there's a lot to think through, is I think all of this is, there has to be a credible threat in it, and that's what's very difficult. Is I do think ultimately at some point there does have to be some sense that if this doesn't happen, forget people's conscience and how they feel or whatever, but just there is a actual material political consequence for it not being followed through on.
And the problem is there's also a material consequence that is
1,000%
affects individuals.
Yes. And again, it goes back to my beginning point of the really hard part about the left position, because it's the most concerned with, basically alleviating human suffering wherever it can.
I gotta go. Yeah. Sean, really appreciate the call. Yeah. All right, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry we couldn't get to more phone calls. It's 2:45 p.m. on East Coast time. I've got to run.
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. Michael will be here tomorrow. I'll be back on Friday. Ryan Grimm will join us. We will talk more about everything that's happened in this campaign, as it were, and where we're at.
Sorry, Ryan. Can't talk now. Self-care.
See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I